Chapter 425. After reading the two contracts several times, Spear Passy solemnly signed her name at the end. One of them was the Memorandum of Unification, and the other was the basic constitution of the Witch Union. The former stipulated that after Timothy Wimbledon's rule was overthrown, she would lead the whole of Fallen Dragon Ridge to pledge allegiance to Roland Wimbledon. At the same time, she would respond to the new king's request and hand over the enfeoffment power. In return, Roland would guarantee her other rights as the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. The memorandum categorized the duties into three categories: personnel, administration, and finance. Although it was a bit novel, it was easy to understand and basically included the matters she dealt with daily. The latter was a decision Spear made after a long consideration. At present, the Witch Union was undoubtedly working for His Highness Roland. She didn't want to tie herself to Prince Roland's carriage so soon. After all, he only occupied one corner of Grey Castle. However, the content of the evening classes was quite attractive. She vaguely sensed that the strange calculation methods would be of great help in the management of the territory. Fortunately, the requirements in the constitution of the Witch Union were very loose. It was more like a formal consensus and didn't even restrict the members' freedom of movement. She had asked His Highness about this, and the answer she got was that they could leave whenever they wanted. "I've signed it." Spear handed the two exquisite parchments to the table, but Roland didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the empty space beside him, as if he was thinking about something. "Your Highness." Ah. He blinked as if he had come back to his senses. "Let me see." This kind of distracted state was rarely seen in the previous negotiations. It seemed that after yesterday's trial, there was a trace of hesitation between His Highness' eyebrows. It was hard for her to understand. The trial was undoubtedly a great success. The people stood on His Highness's side without hesitation and cheered for him. Before this, Spear had never thought that the common people would support a noble so much. She had thought that they were from two different worlds, and that nobles didn't need the people's understanding and didn't care about their support. But yesterday her way of thinking had changed. Looking at the people around the square waving their fists and making the same kind of earth-shattering sound, she suddenly realized that there might be a kind of power that she had never been aware of, and it might even be much stronger than the nobles themselves. Moreover, His Highness's decisive judgment was also one of the reasons why she was determined to sign these two contracts. Regardless of whether he wanted to protect the witches or not, at least he was able to punish the thief who had plotted against him so quickly. This in itself was a kind of sincerity. Since that was the case, she should respond. However, His Highness did not seem satisfied. Was he regretting publicly opposing the church? Spear knew that this was not an easy enemy to deal with. It was related to the direction of future cooperation, so it was better to ask clearly. She hesitated for a moment, and then put forward her speculation. His Highness was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and shook his head. "I have never regretted fighting against the church. They are enemies that must be defeated, no matter what." "Then you." "I'm just feeling a little emotional." "Emotional?" "I'm telling the truth and exposing the crimes committed by the church, but I still feel a little embarrassed." He shrugged his shoulders. "It seems that I'm far from being a qualified politician." "Politician? What was that?" "Someone like an astrologer, someone who focused on studying politics?" Before she could ask, His Highness stopped this topic. "I'll accept the contract. I heard that your ability is related to controlling magic power?" "Yes." Spear did not continue to ask. "To be precise, it's to extract a witch's magic power for other witches to use. Of course, I can also withdraw my own magic power to achieve the purpose of consumption. This process has almost no effect on the outside world, and I can repeat the process in the castle at any time." "How did you discover that you have such an ability?" the prince asked curiously. "Since I awakened," the Marquis replied. "I don't know how other witches understand their ability, but I can feel its existence. It's like suddenly having an extra organ." "Interesting." He nodded thoughtfully. "You should know why I sent Nightingale to Fallen Dragon Ridge to invite you. You need my ability." Spear paused for a moment, and put her hand on her chest. "It's my pleasure to serve you." Since she could not return to Fallen Dragon Ridge now, she might as well see what the prince usually did. Although she had only been in Border Town for more than a week, she found that the scene here was very different from other territories. It was a remote place far from the center of the kingdom, but it was no less lively than King's City. As a lord, she was full of curiosity. What surprised Spear even more was that the life of the local witches was completely different from what she had imagined. Prince Roland did not control them too much, but let them do whatever they wanted. This could be seen from the fact that he waited for Nightingale to return. He obviously wanted her to return earlier, but he still agreed to her request. His Highness did not treat them as his servants. She knew that some nobles secretly hid witches because of their beauty. Now that His Royal Highness was openly recruiting witches, she thought that he would be more unscrupulous, but she didn't expect that he would be so cautious in this regard. Was he still the rumored lustful and incompetent Prince Roland? While she did not know whether to laugh or cry, she could not help but trust him more. Now that she thought about it, what Nightingale had said in front of her was true. Following the prince out of the castle, Spear met the other two witches in a yard in the mountain behind the town. "This is Anna, and that's Mystery Moon," Roland introduced. Mystery Moon's magic power is on the low side in the Witch Union, but her ability consumption is very high. "I'm obviously at the middle level," Mystery Moon protested. "Among the awakened witches," the prince added. The latter immediately became listless. "Do you want me to connect their magic power?" Spear looked at Anna. "She should be the girl with the strongest magic power in the Witch Union, right? I suggest you call more witches. The amount of magic power has a lot to do with their age. Even if there's a difference, there shouldn't be too much of a difference." "It's just a test," His Highness said, stroking his chin. "If this method works, I'll call them over." The Marquis nodded and summoned the magic channel. It was a sphere shining with light blue light, quietly floating in the air. Then under her control, two thin lines stretched out from the sphere, like invisible tentacles, toward Anna and Mystery Moon. "It'll feel a little weird at first, but just relax," Spear explained. "If you resist, it can't transfer magic power by force." When the tentacles sank into Anna's chest, she suddenly froze. "What is this?" The tentacles didn't seem to be connected to rotating magic power, but to a hard metal cube. It was so huge that she felt like an ant standing at the bottom of the metal, looking up to see its top. Chapter 426. How could there be such a form of magic power? Spear stroked the edge of the metal in disbelief. This was her unique way of perceiving magic power. After connecting the channel, she could see, touch, and even smell the magic power in the witches' bodies, as if she were walking into their bodies. The surface of the metal was hard, cold, and as smooth as a mirror. She could see every detail of the tentacle clearly. When it touched the cube, it bounced off immediately. "Relax," the Marquis comforted her. "This thing won't harm you." But she wasn't sure if her ability would work on this hard metal. Anna's magic power didn't seem to flow at all. After several attempts, the tentacle finally stuck to the cube. However, the magic power didn't react. "What's going on?" Nightingale noticed that something was wrong. "I've never transferred magic power like this before. It's too huge, and it doesn't seem to be a flowing aura." Spear felt her throat dry. After the channel is connected, the magic power should be absorbed by the core. "Let me try to inject magic power into it," Anna suddenly said. "Just like how I used the sigil of God's will. Be careful not to output too much at one time." His Highness nodded. What was the sigil of God's will? Spear found that since she came to the small town, she had heard several new words with unknown meanings every day. Just as she was puzzled, the magic power in Anna's body suddenly changed. The perfect mirror was broken at this moment. Ripples appeared on the metal block, and the lightless liquid squeezed into the pipe as if pushed by something and swarmed toward the floating ball. Then she felt its weight. This liquid was extremely heavy. Different from the previous magic cyclones, when it flowed into the core, it felt like stuffing iron ingots into it. Spear found that her magic power consumption was increasing rapidly. This was incredible. Previously, she could easily maintain this ability for more than half a day, but now she found that at this rate, She might not be able to last more than a quarter of an hour. Helplessly, she pulled out an extra tentacle from the core and connected it to her body, using the magic power provided by it to maintain the channel. When the ball of light was completely filled, Anna's metal cube still maintained its original form, as if the magic power was just an insignificant part of it. Spear really wanted to swallow what she had just said. She coughed and said, "Well, the channel can now provide magic power for Miss Mystery Moon. What should we do next?" "Just keep it," Prince Roland said as he handed a cylinder that looked like it was made of red copper to Mystery Moon. "The rest is up to you." "Yes." The latter took a deep breath, held the bronze pillar with both hands, and closed his eyes. His mana began to flow frantically. Spear saw that the metal block inside Anna was glimmering, and the liquid in the core was being drained and refilled quickly. The whole tunnel kept shaking, as if it could be torn apart by the surging magic power at any time. Fine beads of sweat appeared on the Marquise's forehead. She felt as if she was standing in front of an overwhelming tsunami. On the other side, Mystery Moon's brows were slightly furrowed and her cheeks were flushed. It was obvious that she was also suffering from the impact of the waves. But compared to herself, who was just lucky, Mystery Moon should have been more affected. Even so, she didn't stop using her ability, which was proved by the rapid consumption of her mana. Are these girls all monsters? Spear didn't know how she managed to hold on until the end. When the mana in Anna's body was exhausted, she felt weak in her legs and didn't even have the strength to stand. It's done. Mystery Moon opened her eyes and raised the bronze pillar excitedly. "I did it." "Well done." Roland carefully clamped the bronze pillar with a pair of wooden pliers, as if it were a red-hot soldering iron. "What's this?" the Countess asked. "It looks the same as before. A strong magnet whose magnetic force is constantly changing," the prince replied. "I don't know if it will form a channel with the earth and discharge electricity when it's held in someone's hand. It's better to be cautious about this." Spear blinked and asked, "What?" Nightingale laughed. "Ignore them. Only Anna can participate in this kind of conversation. Then, what's its use? Now it's time to verify it." Roland placed the copper pillar into a black iron lump in the middle of the yard. At first glance, it looked like a huge iron tube. At the bottom was a wooden pedestal, and in the middle was an iron rod as thick as an arm. Then the prince looked at Mystery Moon and said, "Turn the switch on. If it works, you'll bring a new source of power to the town." Mystery Moon nodded, grasped a wooden handle beside the iron lump, and pulled it down with force. Sparks burst out from the handle, making a crackling sound. Spear was surprised to find that the iron rod in the middle of the cylinder was spinning rapidly. The problem was this solid long rod weighed at least 1 or 2 people. How could it spin so fast? "Does this count as a success?" "Not yet." The prince found a chair and sat down. He smiled and said, "The key is to see how long it can run." Spear noticed that the prince's eyes were shining, as if he was gazing at a dazzling jewel instead of a simple and crude iron. 3 days later, Roland pushed open the gate of the backyard of North Slope Mountain again. Hearing the noise, Anna stopped what she was doing and strode up to him. She said with irrepressible excitement, "It's still running." Even without her reminder, the prince had also heard the buzzing sound of the electric motor. For him, this noise was like the sound of nature. This meant that the variable magnetic core column, enchanted by Mystery Moon, was still running normally. As a new source of power, it had practical value. Roland walked to the middle of the yard and saw Mystery Moon sitting beside the electric motor with her hands on her head, looking at the black lump with boredom. "Your Highness, you said my ability is full of potential. Are you referring to this thing? It looks no different from a steam engine." "This is just the first step to changing the world," Roland said with a smile. "You'll soon see the changes it brings to the town." Every advancement of human beings was closely related to the way they used energy. In a sense, it could even be used to measure the progress of a civilization. From steam to electricity, and then from electricity to nuclear energy, energy breakthroughs usually brought about huge improvements in industrial production. Mystery Moon's variable magnetic core column was such a new energy source. Similar to a large battery, It could convert magic power into electricity, although its production scale limited its application, and it was far from being able to bring about a revolution in energy. It was still an excellent source of power as a supplement to the steam engine and internal combustion engine. Moreover, as Anna's magic power continued to grow, or as a stronger source of magic power was found in the future, it would have great potential to be tapped. The name Variable Magnetic Core Column is too hard to pronounce. He smiled and said, "Let's call it Dawn Eye." Chapter 427. The electric motor finally stopped running on the afternoon of the fifth day. In other words, one Dawn Eye could provide power for the large electric motor for 5 days. If it was used intermittently, the working time could be extended even longer. After losing the magnetization effect, the copper pillar could be enchanted again. It was a low-consumption, pollution-free, and recyclable green energy source. Its shortcomings were also obvious. One enchantment would exhaust the magic power of Anna, Mystery Moon, and Spear. Even if the three of them produced one Dawn Eye a day, they could only keep 5 electric motors running at most, when the motors weren't turned off. Anna was still an irreplaceable figure in the town's fine processing and steel smelting. Although Roland had tried his best to hand over most of the manufacturing to the ordinary townspeople, the production of revolving guns and bullets would immediately dry up without the machine tools and material supply that Anna manufactured and maintained. Not to mention that the 152mm Longsong cannon, new light weapons, and his own ideas all needed Anna to realize, so he couldn't accept her spending all her magic power on charging the batteries. Roland leaned against the high-back chair in his office and let out a long sigh. To overcome this shortcoming, there were undoubtedly 2 ways. One was to continue to increase the duration of Dawn Eye, which required a larger source of magic power or more people. Unfortunately, it was already very difficult for the Marquis to transport Anna's magic power through the magic channel. After the magic channel was fully charged, she was almost physically and mentally exhausted. Even if she wanted a few more witches to supply energy for Mystery Moon, it would be impossible. Only Spear could slowly adapt to this problem. After all, she probably wouldn't focus on studying how to improve her ability during her tenure as the Lord. The second way was to replace Anna with other witches. Compared to the busy Anna, Soroya, and Agatha, most witches wouldn't exhaust all their magic power every day. It was feasible to use the remaining magic power to make the magnetization core column. As long as the total amount didn't exceed Anna's, Spear should be able to persist. She had said before that the magic channel wasn't a one-to-one transmission, but could be used to connect multiple people at the same time. Roland wrote down this idea on a piece of paper. As for who had more magic power, who had less, how much was used and how much was left, he could ask the Witch Union to calculate it. Vendi, who was trusted by everyone, was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. After solving this problem, the next step was to consider how to use this new energy source. Obviously, the factory could produce 4 or 5 steam engines a month, which could be used after adding some water to boil. Limited by the number of Dawn Eye, there was no point in building more terminal converters. Judging from the current level of magic power, he estimated that the town could only maintain 3 to 4 terminals at most. Whether it was used as a source of power, boiling water, or lighting up the lights, and if he wanted the system to run stably, he would probably have to specialize in one. After thinking for a long time, Roland finally drew a circle on the lamp. The source of power, namely the electric motor, had more advantages than the steam engine, such as stable speed, easy control, and convenient automation, but the latter was enough to meet the current demand for power. He had also imagined some high-end electric equipment, such as the electric scooters that could travel between Longsong Stronghold and the town, or the electric airship that could be controlled by ordinary people, but it was not cost-effective. After all, the operation of these machines was based on the fact that Anna or other witches had to stop working for a day. The same was true for boiling water, which could be solved by a boiler and firewood. Even if he had to hire a few more people to look after and maintain it, it would be more cost-effective than wasting magic power. He wasn't rich enough to squander electricity at will. Lighting had many meanings. Not only could a stable and clean light greatly improve the happiness of the residents, but it would also provide better conditions for them to study at night. Not everyone was willing to go home and continue reading in front of a dim candle after a busy day. Besides, capturing the legendary power of thunder for the people to use would be very beneficial to dispel superstition and improve the spirit of science. This was probably the most intuitive understanding of the use of electricity. Airships and electric scooters, no matter how incredible they looked, were still far from them. Another important point was that the weak light of candles could not meet the needs of night production. With electric lighting, the factory could maintain production even at night, and could even implement 3 shifts when necessary, which meant that the work efficiency of the town would be further improved. After setting the direction of development, to achieve this goal, a series of problems needed to be solved, such as the manufacture of light bulbs, the erection of lines, the power supply plan, and the promotion of electricity consumption. But these could be considered later. Thinking of this, Roland called Vendi. You mean we should calculate the daily consumption and remaining magic power of the sisters, and send it to Mystery Moon according to the plan? Vendi asked after listening to his explanation. Yes, we don't need to calculate the combat witches who have fixed tasks. The prince nodded. What do you think? In essence, it was to deduct the remaining magic power after ability practice, task consumption, and emergency preparation, and then break it up to ensure the production of Dawn Eye. In this way, not only could they make full use of the witch's power, but they could also strengthen their practice, which was a great help to the improvement of magic power on the Day of Awakening every year. I think Hummingbird and Echo will be very happy, Vendi said with a smile. In this way, they can also play the same role as Anna. But how do we measure the remaining magic power? Let's use the stone of measuring to determine it. This is the common method used by the Union in the past. Yes, Your Highness. She bowed slightly and said, By the way, today is Lucia's day of adulthood. Should we gather all the members of the Union to spend the night with her? Roland was startled. Ah, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. You have too many things to remember, Vendi said softly. I have recorded the growth history of each sister in the book, so that it will not be missed. After Anna had passed the Day of Awakening, Nana, Lightning, Echo, and the others had also passed their second birthdays, but the significance of the Day of Adulthood was more intense. It was a special Day of Awakening. Although it happened on the same day, the magic power bite suffered on the Day of Adulthood was several times more than usual. Before the witches could master the pain of the bite, it was the most difficult life and death situation for them. Once they reached adulthood, their abilities would be stabilized and improved. Some witches would also awaken branch abilities, which were no less significant than evolution. Well, I will prepare a sumptuous dinner tonight, Roland said softly. Not only the Witch Union, but I will also spend the night with her. Chapter 428. After dinner, Lucia White's room was full of witches. Seeing everyone's encouraging and comforting expressions, she felt her eyes moisten. Holding back the urge to cry, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I can't cry, it's already shameful enough to cry in front of Nightingale. Lucia warned herself in her heart. My sister is here, so I have to set a good example. Before she took the ship to Border Town, she had only heard that there was a witch organization stationed here. In addition to wanting to cure her sister who was infected with the demonic plague, she only wanted to find a place to stay. She didn't expect to live a good life here. But she had never thought that the life here was not only comfortable and free, but also a group of people who treated her like family. Since her parents had been killed by pirates, she once again felt at home. Will my sister really be in danger? Belle asked, leaning against Lucia's chest. How painful is the magic bite? The pain is unbearable. It's like there are countless knives stirring inside your body, Nightingale said with a grin. There are very few witches who can endure it. Probably only 1 or 2 out of 10 can safely live through adulthood. Oh. The little girl's expression turned cold. Don't scare her, Vendi glared at Nightingale. That was during the time of the Witch Cooperation Association. Now, as long as you practice every day and empty your magic power before the Day of Awakening, there won't be any big problems, Scroll said with a smile. I heard that Anna is still sleeping into adulthood. Moreover, there was also the first high awakening. Agatha yawned. If it were 400 years ago in Tequila, it would definitely cause a sensation. No witch has ever been able to have an epiphany in their sleep. Are you okay? His Royal Highness looked at her. Although work is very important, don't force yourself too much. The Battle of Divine Will is just around the corner. My busy schedule is nothing, Agatha said while covering her mouth. If we fail again this time, it won't be a problem for me to sleep forever. We won't fail this time, Roland said confidently. It's precisely because I'm interested in your inventions that I decided to do more. The Ice Witch rolled her eyes at him. Otherwise, do you think I like staying in the laboratory every day? With that, she tilted her head and muttered softly, even if you don't fulfill your promise, there's nothing I can do to get even with you. All right, don't discuss such a heavy topic at a time like this. Vendi interrupted. By the way, didn't Miss Agatha say that witches can get a wish on the day of awakening? This time it's Lucia's turn. Is there anything you want to fulfill? Me? Lucia was startled when she saw that everyone was looking at her. Big sister, let's trade for ice cream buns. Belle's eyes lit up as she said. Just 10 will do, we'll each take half. This fellow only thinks about eating. She knocked on her sister's forehead and looked at Roland. Can I save this wish? If that's what you want. Roland could not help but laugh. But it won't become much if you save it. One is enough, Lucia said gratefully. She could live in this small town and had nothing else to ask for. She only hoped that Belle could also live a happy life. Her sister was not a witch and would leave her one day to form a new family with someone else. If anything happened at that time, this wish might be able to help her. At this moment, Lucia suddenly felt that her empty body began to tremble. Magic power was generated once again, as if it had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and continuously flowed into her body. It's starting, Nightingale reminded her. Although her sisters had told her not to worry, she still could not help but grip the quilt tightly. Perhaps it was because she was nervous, she felt that her hands and feet were a little cold. Relax. Vendi leaned over and held her hand. Magic power is part of our bodies. Should we talk about something to distract her? Lucia heard someone ask. It seemed to be Lily's voice. What should we talk about? It was Mystery Moon who answered. For example, the results of the second exam. Lily's voice seemed to come from far away. Generally speaking, if we talk about this, the other party will immediately want to stop the topic and divert her attention. For example, Mystery Moon's results. Don't say it. See, it's very effective. Lucia wanted to laugh out loud, but found that the expression on her face was very stiff. Her body became extremely hot, and at the same time, there was an indescribable feeling of contraction. More and more magic power seemed to be sucking in everything around it. Does everyone experience this feeling when they are adults? What is Lucia's result? Mystery Moon's words became intermittent. Average score of 86, the prince replied. What? Is it that high? Look, she didn't even stop us. Your trick failed. Accept your punishment. Go away. Wait, don't fight, Lucia doesn't seem right. Mystery Moon's and Lily's voices alternated, and finally, Nightingale's voice came out, but she found that the witch's words had become blurred. Lucia gritted her teeth and raised her head to look at her sisters, but was surprised to find that the scene in front of her had completely changed. Everyone's appearance became hazy and trivial, as if composed of countless squares, some of which were big, some of which were small, and each of which was different in color. She wanted to scream out in fear, but there was only a hissing sound in her throat. The feeling of contraction in her body became more and more intense, and it began to produce bursts of pain. Lucia could only hold her breath and endure it. The figures around her were already in chaos. Just as Nightingale said, the pain on the day of adulthood was far more intense than the previous awakening. The more she persisted, the more obvious the pain became, as if she would be cut into pieces at any time. Suddenly, a strange magic power entered her body. Lucia could clearly feel that this magic power did not belong to her. It was like a tube, connected to the magic vortex. She had no time to find out what it was, and subconsciously squeezed the surging magic power in her body into the tube. and the pain was immediately alleviated. As if she had found a savior, Lucia kept injecting magic power into the tube to suppress the pain in her body. After an unknown period of time, the strange contraction finally subsided. The magic power no longer rotated, but became full, which was completely different from the previous experience. She blinked, and her vision returned to normal. Looking at Belle, who was about to cry, Lucia patted her head and said in a dry voice, "It's okay now." Only then did she realize that her body was soaked in sweat. The cold wind blew, and she felt a bone-piercing chill on her back. No, how could there be wind in a room full of heating? She turned her head, and could not help but be stunned. She saw a huge gap in the wall facing the garden, and the 2 windows had disappeared, from which the cold wind came. Through the gap, she could see the dark night sky and the lights in the town. Standing in front of this half of the wall was Anna. She looked at her with concern, and the sigil of God's will in her hand shone slightly. "Her ability has condensed," Nightingale said. Chapter 429. When dawn broke, Roland yawned and walked into the office. He had thought it would be an easy day of adulthood, but he did not expect so many accidents. When Nightingale discovered that Lucia's expression was not right, the magic power in her body had already become restless, which was a sign of magic power devouring the body. For a witch who had practiced regularly and had emptied all of her magic power before adulthood, it was really inconceivable. Agatha came up with a solution. As a former member of the Union who had witnessed countless witches awakening, she quickly came up with a solution. The Ice Witch asked Spear Passy to summon a magic channel to draw out the backfiring magic power from Lucia's body. Anna, who had the largest capacity, was responsible for transferring the magic power, and then used the sigil of God's will to absorb the restless magic power. Surprisingly, the drawn-out magic power directly lit up 4 God's stones, and activated the sigil of God's will. Anna didn't hesitate for a second and decisively released it towards the open area. At that moment, the sky above the town was illuminated by a golden sun. The dazzling light penetrated the castle walls, and pierced the starless sky. Thick clouds appeared in the night sky, and thousands of tassels flowed above people's heads. It was a beautiful sight. Although it only lasted for a few seconds, it was a miracle. Lucia was safe and sound in the end, and she even evolved a new ability during adulthood, which was exactly the same as Anna a year ago. However, it was not without trouble. It happened at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and most people were still awake. Many people must have witnessed this strange scene. When Roland returned to his room, he had to think about how to explain this phenomenon to the people. "Your Highness, Director Barov wants to see you." The guard at the door knocked and said, "Let him in." The white-haired Barov quickly walked into the office and asked without saluting, "Your Highness, what happened last night? Why did the night suddenly turn into day?" As expected, he came for the light. Roland glanced at the dark circles on his face, and knew that he did not sleep well either. If the castle did not prohibit outsiders from entering or leaving at night, he would have come to the door immediately. "Don't worry, sit down and talk." The prince pointed at the chair in front of the table. "Have a cup of black tea first." Slowly pouring a cup of hot tea for her, he briefly told her about Lucia's coming of age. "It was just an accident. You don't have to worry too much." "So, this is caused by a witch?" The city hall manager frowned. "Don't think about the demons." Roland quickly guessed what the other party was thinking. No one was hurt except for the missing half of the wall of this dilapidated castle. "But the townspeople will think in this direction," Barov said, shaking his head. "Most of them accept Miss Nana's harmless healing ability, but not the terrible ability to destroy the castle and cause changes in the sky. So I thought of a solution." Roland took a sip of tea and said slowly, "Later, arrange for your men to spread the news. The golden light that appeared last night was because His Royal Highness had captured thunder in the sky. His purpose was naturally to bring light to his people." "What?" Barov was startled. "I will soon set up power supply equipment in Border Town. Its nature is the same as thunder and lightning in the sky." The prince simply explained a few words. He knew that the other party would not understand if he explained too deeply. "This set of equipment can make the town brightly lit at night, which coincides with the news. Is that so? The manager was surprised. You can really make thunder and lightning? It itself is everywhere. Roland shrugged. But you have to remember that this is just a rumor, so you must spread it as a rumor. Do you understand? In order to avoid affecting his future universal education, such remarks must not be too deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. As long as he could temporarily give the people an ambiguous explanation and direct the source of the discussion to himself, it would be fine. Not long after Barov left, the Minister of Construction, Kar van Bate, also came to the castle. Your Highness, in the evening. I know what you want to ask. Roland put his hand on his forehead and said, sit down first. He sighed in his heart. He was afraid that he would have to explain this matter for the whole day. Fortunately, Kar did not think as deeply as Barov. After listening to him, he just sighed and said, it turns out that Anna is already so powerful. At that time, it was indeed a very decisive decision. Roland agreed. If it had been a few seconds later, I'm afraid it wouldn't have been the wall that disappeared, but the whole bedroom. That hole in the wall. Just fill it with bricks and stones. You arrange the specific plan. It should be finished before dusk today. I will let Lightning and Hummingbird help you. The prince said. After repairing the wall, he should let Soroya paint a simulation coating, and the castle should be restored to its original appearance. Yes, Your Highness. Just as he expected, Chief Knight Carter Lannis, First Army Commander Iron Axe, and Alchemist Kyle Sichi took turns to ask about last night's accident. Everyone was concerned about different things. Carter was most concerned about whether he was injured or not. Iron Axe was most concerned about whether the light came from the demon's attack. And Kyle was most concerned about, which was more powerful, the sigil of God's will or the nitroglycerin. Roland didn't send them away until his mouth was dry from all the talking. He leaned against the back of the chair and was about to take a nap when there was another knock on the door. The last one to come was Tilly Wimbledon. Don't worry, what happened yesterday was. I already know, Tilly interrupted him. Before coming here, I asked Miss Anna and she told me what happened. I see. Roland cleared his throat and sat up straight. Is there anything else? I'm just a little concerned about why such an accident happened. Tilly said slowly. According to Lady Agatha, as long as a certain amount of training is guaranteed, it's very difficult to have the symptoms of body devouring. This is basically consistent with our experience. The witches on Sleeping Island have never had such a situation, so why did Lucia fall into the magic bite? She paused a little and shook her head with a smile. As for the High Awakening, I'm not surprised. Since I came to Border Town, I feel like I can see a few every day. A few every day is too exaggerated. Roland poured her a cup of tea and thought for a moment before saying, I have a preliminary guess about what happened to Lucia. He took a report card from the drawer and handed it to Tilly. This may be the reason. Chapter 430. Results? Tilly took the list doubtfully and glanced at it. She has made great progress. Indeed. Roland nodded. Lucia White comes from a merchant family in Valencia. She has a certain foundation in writing and arithmetic. Plus, she has a good understanding of natural theory classes. That's why she has such good grades. I don't doubt what you said about a deeper understanding of the world promoting ability evolution. Tilly twitched her mouth. But what does this have to do with Magic Bite? According to my observations of Lily, Leaf, and Mystery Moon, the evolution of their abilities will also increase the upper limit of their body's magic power capacity. I think this effect has a lot to do with the level of understanding of the world. Roland explained his conjecture in detail based on what Agatha had said about the difference between the ancient High Awakening and the evolution of the abilities of the witches in the small town. They are essentially the same thing, but the effect of a partial or isolated epiphany is far less effective than a comprehensive and holistic understanding of the world. Mystery Moon is an excellent example. Although she's a member of the Witch Union, she completed her evolution through epiphany, so her magic power level is far less than that of Anna and Soraya. Tilly pondered for a while and soon understood what Roland meant. You mean that Miss Lucia's magic power has always been at a low level, and her body has always adapted to this level of magic power, whether it's during normal times or on the day of awakening. And this time, when she reached adulthood, she happened to trigger an evolution at the same time, which caused the magic power in her body to suddenly increase several times, making it far beyond the level that her body can accept? Roughly, but I tend to think these two are different. Roland counted with his fingers. For magic power, the key points of improvement are the day of awakening, the day of adulthood, and the evolution. The effects seem to be the same, but I think the first two are forced to increase, while the last one is an active improvement. Why do you say so? Because the ability evolution will not cause the symptoms of magic bite, the prince said slowly. If there is no difference between the two, the rapid increase of magic power during Anna's evolution will only kill her. I assume that there is a warning line for the magic capacity of a witch's body. If this limit is exceeded, the body will feel the pain of the magic bite. Daily training can gradually increase the upper limit, which is also the purpose of emptying magic power before awakening. Corden? Interesting theory. Tilly said thoughtfully. Do you think that Miss Lucia's magic power increased too much during her evolution, which led to the lack of space reserved for the forced influx of magic power into her body on the day of awakening? So she finally exceeded the limit and caused this accident? That's right. Like Lucia, Anna underwent her first evolution when she reached adulthood. However, her previous magic capacity was already very astonishing, and her vigilance against the backlash was also much higher than that of ordinary witches. Roland paused for a moment. It also explains why Lucia went back to normal after Spear withdrew the agitated magic power. The magic power didn't belong to her in the first place. Your point can explain a lot. She tucked her feverish hair behind her ears and supported her chin with her hand. Why do witches have different forms of magic power even though they have the same origin? Why can the magic power in the outside world only be seen when a witch awakens? It's because the magic power will only become part of a witch's body after she accepts it. Awakening can be seen as attracting magic power, but in the end, only a small part of it can be left. Evolution, on the other hand, is to expand and strengthen this small part of oneself. The wider the understanding, the better the strengthening effect. As for the fact that there is no limit to the number of times a witch can evolve, how can there be an end to exploring the world? I'm suddenly a little curious. What? If you were a witch, how vast would your magic power be after the evolution? Tilly covered her mouth and laughed. Roland almost choked on his own saliva. Although he really wanted to experience the wonders of extraordinary abilities for himself, he would rather not pay such a huge price. Can I take a copy of your textbooks back to Sleeping Island? She raised her eyebrows. Although her tone sounded very casual, Roland noticed that her right hand was gently pinching the hem of her skirt. Of course, no problem. For such a basic question, he would definitely not make a mistake. Generally speaking, the more decisive the better. If we can help the witches of Sleeping Island evolve, it will also be good news for Border Town. Not to mention, you're my sister. Then he felt Nightingale pinch his left shoulder hard. Tilly did not respond to the second half of the sentence. Instead, she nodded slightly and said, "Thank you. I'll leave now." Okay. It seemed that he had been too exaggerated. Before getting a credible explanation, she might not be interested in this kind of flattery. But to Roland's surprise, Tilly stopped at the door and turned around to whisper, "Sometimes, I wish you weren't my brother." After Tilly left, Roland was still sitting at his desk. Her last words were all over his mind. "I don't wish you were my brother. What does that mean? Hey, are you stupid?" Nightingale appeared and waved her finger in front of him. "What do you think she was trying to say?" "How should I know?" Nightingale shrugged. "She probably thinks you're more suitable as an ally than a relative." Roland naturally would not speculate in the wrong direction. After getting along with her for half a winter, he already knew the temperament of this royal woman very well. Does she want to say that she doesn't want Prince Roland to come back? Or is it simply because of my relationship? Anyway, you're not her brother. Why do you care so much? Nightingale turned over and sat on the table. She lifted her long legs, took out a piece of dried fish and stuffed it into her mouth. And when you said that, I could see that you were lying without using my ability. Is that so? Roland touched his nose. So the answer should be the latter? In addition, since Tilly isn't your sister, is it okay to give her the principles of nature? That's called the theoretical basis of natural science. The prince sighed. Do you think she can't make a copy during the winter months? I'm willing to bet that she's already memorized the contents. Even so, she's still making this formal request to me. This is enough to show her attitude. At least from the perspective of political friendship, Tilly's sincerity was impeccable. He paused for a moment and then said, and Sleeping Island is mainly made up of witches. Even if all of them evolve, they still rely on the witch's power. But I'm different. This knowledge can not only help witches but also the people. I rely on the power of all people. Chapter 431. Walking into the backyard of North Slope Mountain against the howling north wind and falling snow, Lucia closed the wooden door to block out the cold. Since winter had come, a wooden shed had been built above the yard. Although it affected the lighting, it could at least prevent the snow from burying the place. A bonfire was burning on one side of the yard. Standing at the door, Lucia could feel the heat from the flames. She took off her gloves and put her cold hands to the bonfire to absorb its warmth. Are you cold? Anna, who was standing in front of the workbench, turned her head and said, Come here. I'll warm you up. Ah, thank you. Lucia trotted to her, and then her whole body was surrounded by a ball of warm green fire. She felt comfortable and soft from head to toe, as if she was soaking in a bath in the castle. What a convenient ability. Lucia thought enviously. She had never been afraid of the cold. Is it warm now? Yes. She nodded hard. What are you making? No, some parts of a new gun. Anna picked up a slender steel pipe with a piston in the middle and pulled it back and forth. His Highness said he wasn't sure if he could make it on the first try, so he had to try again and again. These parts were shiny and smooth, obviously made of the best steel and carefully cut by Blackfire. Before coming to the town, Lucia would never have thought that the surface of iron could be made as smooth as glass. It was like a work of art. Thinking of this, she could not help but raise the corner of her mouth. His Highness Roland and Anna had both said that without high-quality materials, no matter how precise the processing method was, the finished product would only be full of holes. Didn't His Highness come with you? Anna withdrew her green fire. He said he had something to deal with and would come later. He asked me to familiarize myself with my new ability. Lucia curled her lips. What did your ability become after your evolution? She asked with great interest. I don't think anyone in the Witch Union could have caused a bigger sensation than you when you became an adult. Lucia touched her head in embarrassment. If it weren't for you and Lady Spear, I'm afraid I wouldn't have made it to the last moment. You've already thanked me. You don't have to keep it in your heart. Anna waved her hand. Show me your new ability. Lucia nodded and began to drive the magic power in her body. The strange feeling from that night came back to her again. The outline of everything became no longer familiar and continuous, but divided into many small squares, which gathered together according to the color, forming patches of color. But this time, she did not feel the pain of the magic backlash, so she could calm down and carefully examine each square. She picked up a part that Anna had processed. The previously smooth grayish-white surface had become bumpy. Surrounded by magic power, the spots on the surface were clearly visible. There were about 7 or 8 colors, the largest of which was cyan. There was no pattern to their arrangement at all, as if a painter had accidentally spilled a pile of paint on the ground. The only difference was that they had clear boundaries and did not encroach on each other. These weren't the tiny particles His Highness had mentioned. Lucia realized that if they were really the foundation of all things, then these cubes and spots were too big. Above the particles, there was a larger classification, which was called the elements. Particles combined into larger balls according to different rules. These balls had different structures, so they reacted with completely different properties. Back in Valencia, she was still confused about her ability, and did not understand its specific functions. But now, she could clearly understand the concept of elements. According to His Highness' description and classification, what she had observed should be these things. After telling Anna what she had seen and what she thought for a while and said, "This may be a branch of ability." Branch? Ability? That's a rare talent. Anna laughed. Only a small number of adult witches in the Witch Union have it. According to Ms. Agatha, it seems that it only appears on the day of adulthood. Once you miss it, you won't be able to get it again. I think it's closely related to a witch's main ability, or it can be said to supplement and strengthen the main ability. For example, Soroya's magic pen, without it, she would need to mix the paint first before she could paint. The same is true for Teacher Scroll's Book of Magic. She once told me that before she became a minor, although she could quickly memorize most of the books she read, she couldn't share the contents of the books with others because she had no money to buy a pen and paper. She paused for a moment before continuing. And your main ability is decomposition and restoration, so I'm guessing that these blocks of color may be guiding you to precisely separate a certain type of element. Perhaps you can give it a try and see if you can separate a certain color block? Lucia nodded and once again used her ability on a piece of pig iron ingot next to the work table. Different from the previous decomposition, this time she carefully let her magic power bundle into thin threads to pull those cyan cubes. This process was much more difficult than she had imagined. She had never manipulated her magic power so meticulously, but Lucia was also very happy. Compared to before she became an adult, she could now feel the existence of magic power more clearly, as if it had become her fingers or even an extension of her consciousness. As more and more fine threads stuck to the color cubes, the cubes finally loosened and were pulled out of the iron ingot. The remaining color cubes suddenly changed. The original clear border trembled, and then the whole iron ingot collapsed and curled into a yellowish-green crystal the size of half a fingernail, with a square iron cube next to it. Lucia withdrew her ability and wiped the fine sweat on her forehead. She noticed that the color of the two cubes was different under the magic vision and normal vision. The previous cyan color cubes had become silver-white, which was the common luster of pure iron. The latter was still colorful, but if she didn't use her ability, it looked like a clean gem. What's this? She gently pinched the small crystal. Compared to the iron ingot, its size was insignificant, but it looked much more beautiful. This may be a compound of other elements in pig iron. Anna's eyes sparkled. I'm not sure, but I can do a small experiment to verify it. If it's true, do you know what it means? You can separate a part of an element from a complete object, and the remaining elements won't turn into a pool of sand, but recombine according to the conditions of the lost element. Any useless inferior material can be reborn in your hands. Chapter 432. After Lucia came of age, Border Town also entered the last month of winter. But for the months of demons, the end of winter did not mean the end. The heavy snow often lasted until the next spring. As for when it would subside, it was completely up to God. Based on past experiences, the months of demons ended in the first half of the first month of spring, which was quite a difficult period. The second half of the first month was a very difficult period. If the months of demons continued to the second month, it would be very difficult to even survive. But this was only the situation that Border Town residents had encountered. This year's situation had greatly improved. Even if the months of demons lasted until the end of the second month of spring, the stored wheat in the granary would be enough to fill everyone's stomachs. Naturally, Roland would not be satisfied with the passing line of not starving or freezing to death. These days he had been lying in front of his desk in high spirits, drawing drawings, and thinking about his next stage of large-scale production plan. The entire plan was divided into two aspects, military and civilian. The former included the construction of new weapon factories, bicycle factories, docks, and shallow water heavy gunboats. The latter was mainly about water, heating, and electricity supply in residential areas, as well as the popularization of iron farming tools. It was Lucia White who made him full of motivation. After testing her new ability, Roland clearly realized that the last restriction of large-scale production had been solved, and the productivity of Border Town would usher in a new peak with the growth of the population. This restriction was the supply of materials. Modern smelting was a very complicated subject, and the output of steel was one of the most important parameters to measure an industrial country. But Roland did not know much about it, so the iron-making ability of Border Town was still very backward. The technology was not beyond this era, and the scale was not even comparable to some private smelters of mining merchants. When the iron ore was smelted into pig iron in the brick blast furnace, the good quality was sent to make steam engines, and the bad quality was given to Anna for further smelting into steel. But this process was completely uncontrollable, and the carbon content was also high and low. Sometimes the usable materials could only fill 2 or 3 carriages after a whole day of work, which greatly limited the production capacity of the steam engine factory. And although Anna's special furnace could transform inferior pig iron into quality controllable steel, the output was only enough for the military factory. In autumn, it could basically meet the town's needs, but when winter came, the army went through 2 expansions, and in addition to the development of new firearms and cannons, this amount of steel was a little insufficient. Lucia's evolution could be said to be a cardiac stimulant. Her targeted separation ability could easily remove the undesirable components in the materials, and she could also adjust the proportion of various elements during the smelting stage, so that each furnace of molten steel could maintain the same performance. It could be said that with Anna and Lucia, the level of smelting in Border Town was enough to instantly improve several levels. For that, Roland had asked Anna to put aside all her other work and focus on building the new generation furnace. Compared to the special furnace designed for her before, the new furnace was more than 10 times larger. It was 50 meters long, 10 meters wide, and nearly 4 meters tall. At first glance, it looked like a slender swimming pool. In essence, it was no different from the previous generation of special furnaces. It was still an iron box without any heating equipment. It relied entirely on Anna's black fire to smelt. However, it was buried in the ground and relied on the soil to support the pressure of the molten iron on the walls. There was a walkway in the center, just enough for Anna to heat the iron ingots on both sides at the same time. It only had one advantage, which was that it was large enough. If smelting according to the previous method, just the amount of limestone used to remove impurities would be a large number, and it would take a lot of effort to clean up the generated impurities. Adding materials and stirring would also be a big trouble, so it couldn't be made too large. But now, these concerns were completely gone. As long as the pig iron was melted, and then Lucia would remove the phosphorus, sulfur, and other harmful components, it would be enough. Roland planned to build a new batch of furnaces together with the old blast furnace and the old shaft furnace. They were only responsible for the initial smelting and didn't care about the quality of the finished product, as long as the ore could be melted and turned into square iron ingots. Then these iron ingots would all be put into the new furnace for secondary refining. The molten steel would flow through the gate into the lower terrain template, directly forming materials that could be processed. After that, the steam engine plant would also be converted to steel production, which would inevitably bring a stronger source of power to the town. Roland called the new furnace Star of Steel. Once Anna's manufacturing was completed, and the Star of Steel was officially put into production, the town's steel production would increase by more than 10 times. It could be said that the new large-scale production plan was built on this foundation. In addition, the development of new light weapons had also come to a conclusion. Roland found that his original idea was not appropriate. He referred to the principle of the gas-conductive automatic rifle in the future, and designed a few prototype weapons himself. Simply put, automatic weapons used a part of the high-pressure gas when the bullet was fired to complete the unpacking and loading action, thus achieving the process of reloading. This work lasted about half a month. It wasn't very difficult, but he needed to repeatedly test whether each part could work properly. He didn't need to memorize the specific structure of a certain rifle. As long as he knew how it worked, he could always put together a usable weapon after a few tries. This was the problem. The assembled prototype weapon was not only big and black, but there were nearly 100 parts, each of which was personally made by Anna. Especially the springs, firing pins, gas-conductive pistons, and other small things, it was difficult to mass-produce with the current level of machine tools. If he wanted to replace all the revolving rifles in the hands of the soldiers with automatic weapons, not only would it be a great burden on Anna, but it would also be a waste of the gun processing equipment that had already been put into production. In addition, if all the soldiers were to be equipped with automatic weapons, the ammunition consumption would undoubtedly be astronomical. At first, Roland didn't pay too much attention to this, thinking that it could be solved by increasing the number of people in production. However, he soon discovered that once the new weapons were produced on a large scale, they could easily swallow all the output of the acid factory. As for the small problems that often occurred during the test firing, such as jams and firing failures, they were not important. After repeatedly weighing the pros and cons, he finally gave up the idea of a large-scale replacement of automatic weapons. However, increasing the firepower output of the army was an urgent need, so he set his eyes on another type of continuous firing weapon. That was the heavy machine gun. If 20 to 50 people were assigned a heavy machine gun, the number of weapons would be greatly reduced, and the two most troublesome problems would be easily solved. It could also be automatically loaded using gas-conductive methods, and its structure was similar to the prototype weapon. After some modifications, it could be put into principal testing. In addition, it could be made a bit larger, and the parts didn't need to be designed to be as tight as spider webs, which was equivalent to reducing the difficulty for him. Chapter 433. In addition to improving the firepower of the heavy machine gun, Roland also planned to develop a bolt rifle as a supplement for mid-range and long-range accurate shooting. He did not need to produce too many, just about 100. The caliber was the same as that of the heavy machine gun, and with a scope it was a simple sniper rifle. In this way, the production of revolving guns and black powder bullets could also be maintained without too much wastage. During the battle, the field artillery would be responsible for suppressing the enemies within 1,000 to 800 meters, and the heavy machine gun would be the best target from 800 to 500 meters. The enemies within 500 meters would be targeted by the snipers, and the last 200 meters would be cleared by the revolving guns. In theory, there would be no break in the attack. Of course, it would take 3 to 4 months to fully implement this configuration, and it might not be in time for the spring offensive. Therefore, he needed another piece of equipment to make up for the lack of offensive firepower. The river gunboat equipped with 152 mm long-barreled guns. As long as he had one, he would be able to put great pressure on the enemy when he took the initiative to attack. At the thought of the city-building ceremony to be held after the months of demons, the unification of the entire western region, the removal of Timothy from the throne, and the acceptance of the new population, Roland felt that the task on his shoulders was getting heavier and heavier. He even hoped that time would pass more slowly, and the months of demons would not end so soon. After entering the western region, the surrounding scenery became different. Otto Luashi lifted the wooden plank of the window and looked out. All he saw was a vast expanse of whiteness. The sky was covered with dense snowflakes, which drifted and swirled in the cold wind and finally merged into the whiteness. It seemed that the snow would never stop. During the 2-day voyage he saw nothing else. Everything here was covered with snow, including mud, rocks, and trees. If it were not for the constant shaking of the ship, he would not have felt that he was moving forward at all. "Close the window," the captain said grumpily. "If you really want to see, you can go to the deck. No one will stop you." "Has it always been like this here?" He closed the plank indifferently. "Of course. Do you think I'm bluffing?" The captain took a sip from the flagon. "Every year during the months of demons, the western region will be closed by heavy snow. There's no other way to get there except by the Redwater River. There are no more than 10 people in King City who are willing to brave the damned weather to take this route, and still have a ship in their hands." He hiccuped. "So 5 golden dragon is a very reasonable price, understand? It's a little expensive, but I didn't bargain when I paid," Otto said with a smile. "That's a good answer," the captain said as he tossed the flask over. "It's warm. Drink a few mouthfuls. It'll drive away the cold." He wiped his mouth and said, "There was a businessman like this in the past. He wanted to get to the western region earlier than anyone else to buy goods, but he was reluctant to pay the extra fare. In the end, he found a group of rats in Black Street to send him there. What was the result? The 2 or 3 mercenaries we brought with us were completely useless. They were all fed to the fish. That's really unfortunate. Otto did not pull out the cork and pour the wine into his mouth. Instead, he took off his gloves and held it in his hands. He was not used to sharing the same vessel with others. You get what you pay for. It's the same everywhere. There are always people who think they can take advantage of others. He didn't think that if the rats could steadily deliver goods at such a low price, wouldn't our shipping company be disbanded? The captain curled his lips. By the way, what business do you want to do in the Western region? Don't blame me for not reminding you. This damn place used to produce some jewelry and furs, but now you can't buy anything. Oh, Otto pretended to be curious. As far as I know, don't they make a living from this? Are the people in the Western region all robbers now? That's all old news. The captain put his pipe near the charcoal brazier and took a deep breath. Since Prince Roland took over Border Town, the Western region has become strange. You know, both furs and jewelry are produced in that town. No one knows what he's doing in his territory. The whole business is almost only in and out. Longsong Stronghold still sells jewelry, but the nobles have their own fixed channels. You can't get involved. Only in and out? He asked in surprise. Yes. Although you can't buy local products, the merchants who sell their goods are still doing well. Whether it's food, clothes, cloth, or sundries, they can basically sell everything. I don't know where Prince Roland got so many golden dragon. The captain blew out a ring of smoke. So you're probably going to return empty-handed. Otto pretended to be worried about his personal gains and losses, and didn't answer. In fact, he didn't care whether he would return empty-handed or not. The real purpose of this trip was to meet with the Lord of Border Town. Because of Roland Wimbledon's identity as a rebel king, he could not go as an emissary with great fanfare. He had to disguise himself as a merchant and go to the border. Before he set off, he had carefully inquired about the destination. As its name suggested, it was an insignificant border town in a neighboring country. It was originally built to monitor the invasion of demonic beasts, and later changed into a permanent residence. It was reasonable to say that when a prince was enfeoffed to such a place, he was extremely disliked by the king and left to fend for himself. Judging from Prince Roland's reputation, it was very consistent. But the problem was that he not only gained a firm foothold in the Western region, but also posed a great threat to the new king. This was what Otto found most difficult to understand. If Prince Roland really had such ability, how could he have left such an unbearable comment and been kicked to a remote place by the king? According to the intelligence, the rise of Roland Wimbledon was incredible. A year ago he was enfeoffed to Border Town. In fact, it was more like a kind of exile. He did not have any ministers accompanying him, nor did he have his own guards. Even the knights by his side were sent by the king. With such a thin team, it was difficult to subdue the local nobles, let alone implement his own policies. This enfeoffment was also discussed as a joke by most people. However, only 6 months later, Prince Roland defeated the invasion of the Duke Ryan, sent troops to capture Longsong Stronghold, and became the real ruler of the Western region. There were various rumors about this battle. Some people said that the Duke died in an internal rebellion, while others said that he died because his horse lost its footing, which led to the loss of the Knight Regiment to a group of miners. After that, Roland firmly sat on the position of guardian of the Western region. The war caused by the order for the selection of the crown prince became more and more intense. Prince Gerald and Princess Garcia died one after another, and Princess Tilly was missing. The cities of the southern and eastern region were destroyed in the continuous war, and only the western region was safe. This was not because of Timothy's mercy, but because the troops sent by the new king had repeatedly disappeared. Otto was very curious about this. What had Roland done to cultivate such fierce soldiers? Boss, Border Town is just ahead. The sailor opened the cabin door and said, "We're almost there." Oh, finally. The captain tapped his pipe. "Lower the sails and raise the flag. Tell the dock we're coming. After we get ashore, I have to find a tavern to have a few drinks." He looked at Otto and said, "Hey, don't forget your luggage. We'll meet in 2 days. If you don't arrive on time, I won't wait for you." Otto shrugged to show that he had no objection. Among all the news about Prince Roland, there was one particular rumor that he was particularly concerned about. It was that Roland had turned to the demons and was secretly recruiting witches. This was the real reason why he could quickly defeat the Duke and occupy the entire western region. The burning of the stronghold church, the killing of the chief priest, and the expulsion of the believers were all evidence of this. In fact, this rumor was also the reason why he made up his mind to come here. He did not care whether Roland had made a deal with the demons or recruited witches. He only cared that Roland had a grudge against the church. In this regard, Roland was more to the Kingdom of Dawn's liking than Timothy. With a violent shake of the cabin, the sailboat docked. Chapter 434. Since it was a quiet trip, no one would come to greet him. Therefore, Otto did not intend to go straight to the castle at the beginning. No words could compare to seeing with his own eyes. He planned to spend a day or two to observe the prince's territory, and then find the local rats to get some information. When he walked out of the cabin and stepped on the trestle, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Is this a dock in Border City? Within a few hundred steps along the riverbank, there was a dock area made of reddish-brown bricks. There was a trestle at regular intervals, and there was a sign at the junction of the trestle and the dock, with a number written on it. Otto roughly counted them. There were 26 of them in total. They were neatly arranged, like tentacles extending from the shore. Some of them were covered with snow, while others had yellowish-brown planks exposed. This showed that even in the months of demons, there were still people guarding the town's pier. In contrast, the length and number of trestles of the canal in King's City of Greycastle were less than half of this. But what surprised him even more was the ships docked at the dock. A line of gray wide-bodied ships that he had never seen before was docked not far in front of him. There were 7 or 8 of them. They had a shallow waterline, no sails, no masts, and the size of their hulls did not seem to be able to be moved by oarsmen. The most unique feature of these strange ships was that there was a huge wooden wheel on each side, and a thick iron pipe sticking out of the center. They looked different from any other inland river sailboat. Otto watched them for a long time until he felt a chill on his head, but he still could not figure out how these strange ships could move. Patting the snow on his head, he put away his doubts and decided to follow the crew into the town. This smooth wind from King's City would obviously not only transport him. Otto saw the crew moving bags of goods off the sailboat and piling them up on the side of the dock. Several guards in black uniforms were recording something with pen and paper. From time to time, they would pick out 2 bags and check them. It seemed that they were inspecting the goods. Who are they? Mercenaries hired by the buyer? Otto walked to the captain. Ah, mercenaries? The captain grinned. These people are the patrols of Border Town. He could not help but be surprised. Patrols? Wouldn't that be equivalent to running into a gang of robbers? The first time he left the inner city of the King's City, he was blackmailed of 2 silver royals by the patrolmen, and the situation was almost the same everywhere. They were the opposite of underground rats, but the work they did was not much different from the rats. The only difference was that they charged more, and often took the money but did not do the work. But to Otto's surprise, the captain just smoked his pipe leisurely and didn't stop them from inspecting, nor did he take out a few silver royals to ask them to leave. I had the same thought as you when I first came here. The captain seemed to have read his mind. The patrol here is different. As long as you follow their rules, you don't have to pay any fees before entering the market. The patrol team's rules? Otto frowned. Even bandits were reasonable in this place, and they even knew how to write things down with pen and paper. Although they were probably just some crooked symbols, it was still incredible. What are they recording? He asked. The type and quantity of the goods. Especially the wheat. The captain spread out his hands and said, They have to check the goods after they arrive at the market in case you sell them to someone else. Here, only the Lord can sell the food. Of course, I don't have any wheat in my goods, so the check will be faster. When all the bags were loaded onto the carriages, they left the dock and headed for the market along the spacious street. Otto suddenly found that his eyes were not enough to see everything. Was this really the most remote territory of the Greycastle Kingdom? Looking at the flat hard road under his feet, the neat rows of beautiful houses on the street, and the people coming and going. It was not much worse than the city of Glow, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn. As a noble, it was not that he had never seen beautiful and magnificent buildings. Whether it was the Dawn Spire or the Sun Reflection Hall, these 2-story or 3-story buildings were not comparable to them. However, there was only one Dawn Spire, and it was surrounded by dilapidated houses, muddy paths, and dirty water everywhere. But here, he could not find a single slightly old house, as if all these residences had appeared at the same time. "You look surprised," the captain laughed and said. "Don't mind it, everyone who comes here will show the same expression. I have to say, Border Town is a magical place. Do you see the 3-story building over there? It wasn't here the last time I came." "I heard that. This place used to be a base built for mining." "That's what I heard, but who knows the truth?" He picked his nose and said, "You know, some rumors will become unrecognizable if they spread too much. Maybe there's a lot of gold hidden in the North Slope mine, so His Majesty sent his son here. After all, he's his own son." "Wait, what's that?" Crossing a flat square, Otto suddenly saw 2 huge colorful balls floating side by side in the air, with a pair of banners hanging below. There were striking words written on the banners. On one side, "Welcome to Border Town," and on the other side, "Join now and you can get citizen benefits." "Are you asking about the one above or the one below?" The captain pouted. "I don't know how they got the flying ball up there. As for the one below, you can go to the east side of the square to learn about the situation. The Lord's notices are often posted there, and this banner is to attract travelers, merchants, and refugees from all over the country. They even want refugees." Otto was surprised. "What citizen benefits?" "You can work here, get subsidized food for the first 2 months, and get a shelter from the wind and rain. Sounds good, right?" The captain explained disapprovingly. "It's not that easy to get approved. Several of my crew members have tried, but none of them qualified. The Lord wants them not to be disloyal, not to believe in the church, and not to have a criminal record. Stealing is also a crime. God, which sailor hasn't stolen something? Also, in my opinion, even though this place looks prosperous, there are still many shortcomings. Such as? There are too few places to have fun. There are no casinos, no brothels, and not even a prostitute on the street," he spat. "If you live in such a place for too long, won't you suffocate to death?" The market was to the north of the square. While the captain and his crew went to deliver the goods, Otto decided to take a walk here alone. According to the captain's introduction, there were many rare goods in the convenience bazaar, and the boutique market on the other side. In fact, from eggs to dried fish, to clothes to farming tools, a dazzling array of goods filled the shelves. As long as he stayed in front of the stalls for a while, someone would come up to talk about it. Regardless of the outcome of the talk with Prince Roland, he had been deeply attracted by this town. Just then, there was a commotion in the crowd. He turned his head and found 2 women walking toward him. One of them had a long black ponytail, and was also dressed in a black robe. She had beautiful facial features, but her cold expression made people feel unapproachable. The other was completely different. Her expression was soft, and her every move showed elegance and calmness, which reminded people of a warm spring breeze. Her swaying blonde hair was like the light of dawn. When he saw the blonde woman, Otto felt his blood boil. His hands trembled slightly, and he repeatedly rubbed his eyes to make sure he was not mistaken. Chapter 435. Genius in a second to remember love. Go divided by small? Talk.net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Please enjoy. The maid placed the wine on the square table, and looked at the 3 of them strangely. If you need more wine, just pull the rope by the door. Love go small. Talk.net co got it. You can go. Otto waved his hand. The latter bowed and left. As the door closed, the noise in the hall was blocked out, and the room suddenly became quiet. Until now, he still felt his heart beating fast. He stared at Andrea without blinking, afraid that she would suddenly disappear. I thought it was a dream. Belinda and Oro thought you were dead. I didn't expect to see you again one day. After he couldn't help but shout in the market, the other party also shifted her gaze to him. The fact that she could react to this name proved that she didn't just happen to look like him. No, it should be said that they could not be two people. Andrea's voice and appearance were so outstanding, and her every move had a unique temperament. It was difficult for other women to compare. However, Andrea's reaction was not as surprised as he expected. Instead, she frowned, walked to him, and ordered him to follow her. Then, she hurried out of the market. She probably did not want to attract too many people. Yes, nobles should not shout in a place where commoners gathered. He was too impolite. He followed the two of them into a private room in a tavern, and only then did he have the chance to carefully look at her again. It had been 5 years, but she still looked the same as he remembered. If this was a dream, he hoped that it would last longer. "Is this your old lover?" The black-haired woman whistled. "Since you insisted on coming, you should know the value of silence." Andrea glared at her. "No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. I'm doing this to protect you." Roland grinned. "Besides, you forced me to buy Tilly's birthday present at first, and now you want to drive me away. Isn't that too unbecoming of a noble?" "Aristocratic demeanor depends on who you're talking to," Andrea snorted. "It's not necessary for you. This is." Aotua couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when he didn't get a response. He could only look at the black-haired woman with an equally outstanding appearance. "Your friend?" "Ashes." Before Andrea could speak, she said directly, "Who are you and why do you know her?" "I'm Atalosai from the Kingdom of Dawn." He was slightly surprised by the question. This woman who called herself Ashes was too blunt and sharp. She did not seem to be a well-educated nobleman. Why would Andrea hang out with such a person? "I've known Andrea, my sister Belinda, Oro of the Tokat family, and the eldest son of the King of Dawn, His Highness Appin. We're friends who talk about everything." It sounds like a story about a group of powerful people. Ashes shrugged. "Did you just say she's dead?" "That's because—" "Enough," Andrea interrupted. "Belinda and Oro are right. The lady of the Quinn family you're familiar with is dead. But you're still here." Aotua shook his head repeatedly. What happened at that time? In the city of Glow, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, apart from the royal family, the most prominent nobles were the Tokat, Quinn, and Luashi families. The heads of these families were the king's most trusted companions and ministers with real power. This tradition had been passed down since the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn was established, and it was still the same in this generation. Andrea was the eldest daughter of the Quinn family. She was impeccable in both appearance and family background. She had countless suitors, including Otto and Oro. However, no one expected that during a spring outing, Andrea's carriage would suddenly go out of control and fall into the mountains. This accident even alerted the king. The royal family, together with the three families, searched for a long time before they found her mutilated body at the foot of the mountain. After learning the result, Aotua felt sad for a long time. Compared to Oro, who had already started to pursue her, he had not had the chance to tell her his feelings. He had thought that he would never have this chance again. He did not expect to meet her again in this foreign land. After a long time, Andrea sighed softly. "It wasn't an accident. What? The carriage went out of control and fell into the mountains 5 years ago. It was all planned by my family," she said in a low voice. "My father discovered my identity as a witch." Aotua was stunned. "A witch? It seems that you hid it well." Ashes covered her mouth and said, "You can even hide it from your childhood friends." Andrea ignored her. "That's right. After my father learned about it, he immediately arranged for the accident. I wasn't the one in the carriage. Instead, the coachman and the maidservant died. After that, he sent me out of the Kingdom of Dawn, and finally lived in seclusion in the broken cliff city of Grey Castle." She paused. "In fact, he never asked for my opinion, nor did he care about my opinion. All he did was to get rid of me as soon as possible. So that's what happened." Otto fell silent. The flower of Glow, who was deeply loved by the people, had turned out to be a witch. If this news got out, it would probably cause a serious blow to the Quinn family. However, the act of faking the accident was also to protect Andrea's safety. As a well-informed upper-class noble, He had heard more than once about the miserable treatment of witches who fell into the hands of the church. After hesitating for a moment, he spoke his mind, but was interrupted by Andrea's sneer. Protect? As long as my father doesn't hand me over, what can the church do? Bring the judgment army into the inner city to arrest me? Andrea raised her voice. He's the prime minister of the King of Dawn, and controls the outer city patrol, but he did nothing. Miss Nana's father was originally just a baron, but for the sake of his daughter, he rushed into the Lord's castle and argued with His Royal Highness face to face. But he only drove me out of my home. Is this also protection? Aotua was speechless. After a long silence, he asked hesitantly, will you go back? That day won't come. Andrea stood up. As I said, the eldest daughter of the Quinn family died 5 years ago. That's what my father wants to see. Oro goes to your grave every year to lay flowers. He still can't forget you. She walked to the door and whispered, that's just his wishful thinking. He'll forget you one day. Watching the two disappear from the room, Aotua lay on the bench powerlessly. He somewhat hated his cowardice. Even now, he was still bringing up Oro instead of expressing his true feelings. I can't forget you either. He closed his eyes. Chapter 436. Genius in a second to remember love go divided by small? Talked net providing you with wonderful novels to read. Roland learned from Anna that Tilly was about to celebrate her 20th birthday. Love go small say netco only now did he remember that there was such a thing. He could not be blamed for being careless. The memories of the fourth prince were like a database to him, and he would only look through them when necessary. But there was too little content about current politics and occultism, and it was mostly about troublemaking experiences and self-satisfied pranks. Therefore, the frequency of him looking back on this memory was getting lower and lower. For the fourth prince, Tilly was a dark history, so the part she occupied was naturally insignificant. The content related to her was suppressed to the lowest level, as if he did not want to remember it at all. Tilly's birthday did not refer to the day of her awakening, but the literal day of her birth. Due to the special nature of the extraordinary, she did not even know when she had awakened as a witch, and every year during the months of demons, she would not feel the turning point of the magic bite on her body. Therefore, for her, her birthday was the only thing. After looking through this memory, Roland found that, probably because Tilly was the last child of the Queen, when Wimbledon III was still alive, he would hold a grand birthday celebration for her every winter in the inner city. Even the most favored Timothy had not received such treatment. But other than that, he rarely paid attention to Tilly, as if he did not care about her life. If not for this, the fourth prince would not have dared to bully his sister again and again. As he flipped further, he found something interesting. On the day of Tilly's coming of age, the scale of the celebration was also the largest. Even the subsequent coming-of-age ceremonies could not compare. Not only did the 4 border guards rush to the capital, but there were also gifts from the Kingdom of Dawn, the Kingdom of Wolfheart, and the Kingdom of Everwinter. Even the Fjord Islands had sent emissaries. They wanted to teach Tilly a lesson, and let her understand that she was not the kind of person her father liked. The reason why Wimbledon III had done this was just to make it up to the late Queen. His kindness to Tilly was just to comfort his mother in heaven. Regardless of whether Roland believed it or not, they believed it at the time. So the two of them went to find Prince Roland, and tried to instigate him to fight. However, ever since he was taught a harsh lesson by Tilly 8 years ago, he was no longer willing to provoke his seemingly quiet but rebellious sister. So he refused to agree no matter what. Left with no choice, the two of them decided to do it themselves. Prince Roland did not know how exactly they did it, but the result was that a pair of bear cubs as a gift from the Kingdom of Wolfheart were poisoned to death, which was also Tilly's favorite gift at that time. Seeing his sister holding the dead bear cubs in a daze, Prince Roland found a trace of pleasure in his heart. No wonder he was the scum of the royal family. Except for murder and arson, he really did all kinds of bad things. No matter what, this must be a terrible memory for Tilly Wimbledon. Love Gobe Small, say Netco. After reading it, Roland quickly thought of what he should give her. He spread out a piece of white paper, and began to draw his gift. What is this? Nightingale poked her head out from behind. A bear. Yes, a bear plushie, the kind that you can hug to sleep, Roland said with a smile. Based on his limited gift-giving experience, he knew that most girls had no resistance to cute and furry gifts, and a plushie of the same height could perfectly blend these 2 points. Of course, simple plushie production was not difficult for him, so it was not unusual. Since he was a prince and had the technical support of a group of witches, he could naturally make it more unique. On the day of Tilly's birthday, Roland came to her room with a gift. After knocking on the door, she was the only one in the room. When she saw him, she was slightly surprised. Why are you here? Today is your birthday. I will hold a sumptuous dinner in the castle tonight, Roland said with a smile. But before that, I have a gift for you. A gift? Tilly was slightly surprised. Is it the one in your arms? She turned her body sideways. Come in. It's a little big, but I promise it's very special. The prince wiped his forehead and put the gift on the floor of the living room. In this era, gifts between nobles were small and exquisite. From flowers to rings, they could be hidden in the gown in advance, and then taken out unexpectedly to give the other party a surprise. It was indeed rare to see a gift like him holding a wrapped cardboard box, and this thing was much heavier than he thought. You've never given me anything before. Tilly's tone was a little unpredictable. You were given a quill when you were born, Roland corrected her. Although it's not a precious gift. Well, it's a royal tradition in Grey Castle. She shrugged. What about this? Can I open it? Of course. Roland smiled and sat beside her, watching her untie the ribbon little by little. When the cardboard box was put down, he heard her slightly gasp. What is this? Tilly blinked. A bear. Roland grinned. How can a bear look like this? She curiously circled the doll twice, and then could not help but touch it. It's so soft. Its skin was drawn by Soroya, and the template was the fur of a northern wolf cub. It was extremely smooth to the touch. As for the shape, Roland designed it completely according to the giant panda of the future. As an ancient species that could survive by acting cute, and was popular as a diplomatic gift around the world, its cuteness was evident. I've never heard of this kind of bear. Its color is too strange. Doesn't it look good? No, I mean. Tilly did not seem to know how to describe it, but her sparkling eyes revealed her inner thoughts. It's called a giant panda and it's a widely loved animal. She quickly realized, this is from another world. Roland nodded. And it's not just a doll that can be hugged. Try pinching its neck. After Tilly did as she was told, the panda suddenly moved. Its legs moved back and forth, as if it wanted to climb onto Tilly's body. She covered her mouth in surprise and took 2 steps back. The doll did not stop after landing on all fours, but slowly crawled towards her. This was the reason why it was so heavy. Roland had implanted connecting rods and gears in its body that could move back and forth. Each of its limbs was driven by a small motor, and the motor was powered by the shrunken dawn eye. As the intensity of the magnetic flux was reduced, the duration of the enchantment was also greatly extended. When not in use, it could last for 3 to 4 months, but when used continuously, the duration would be reduced by about 20%. Even if Tilly returned to Sleeping Island, the panda would be able to accompany her for a long time. Pinch its neck again, and the doll will stop. Roland smiled. I hope you like this gift. This time, even if Tilly did not reply, he could see the answer from her expression. Chapter 437. Genius in a Second to Remember Love or Go Away. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Why did you want to give me this? After a while, Tilly put down the doll. Do you remember what happened when you were an adult? Roland said slowly. She pursed her lips. Did you do it? No, it was Timothy and Garcia. The prince told her about the past. But I'm also responsible. If I had told my father, none of this would have happened. You were beaten up by them. Tilly sighed. So it's normal that you didn't tell them. It won't happen again. I thought the extra memories in your head were all true knowledge and knowledge. She did not respond. Instead, she changed the topic. Now it seems that's not the case. Are there any other new things besides the panda? When he heard her roll up her tongue and mumble the unfamiliar syllable, Roland could not help but smile. Of course, there are many. If there's a chance, I can tell you slowly. Tilly was undoubtedly smart. He believed that she would understand him as long as he said half of his words. Sure enough, after a brief daze, she stared at Roland thoughtfully. At this time, Andrea's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Lady Tilly, I've brought you a present. Go away. I was the first one, okay? Then came Ash's voice. I was the first one. Roland laughed and stood up. A lot of unpleasant things have happened in the past, but they are in the past. I don't think we should be bound by our memories, whether it's me or you, Border Town or Sleeping Island. If you encounter any trouble in the future, you can come to me at any time. I'll always be your brother. He paused. Happy birthday, Tilly. He opened the door. The two witches were stunned and stared at each other. The prince smiled. Don't argue. I'm the first one. Otto felt lost as he walked down the street. Andrea's words still lingered in his ears. The eldest daughter of the Quinn family died 5 years ago. This is what father wants to see. He felt that this sentence was not correct. He wanted to refute it, but he did not know where to start. These days, in addition to observing Border Town, he spent the rest of his time wandering around the market, hoping to see her again, but ultimately to no avail. Otto walked to a stone bench by the side of the square, brushed away the snow on it, and slowly sat down. Although his thoughts were surging, he did not forget the purpose of his trip. Apart from the military camp, he had walked through every corner of the town and gained a comprehensive understanding of the place. For example, the townspeople's lives were not as well off as they had been in the beginning. Instead, they were no different from ordinary poverty. All these changes came from Lord Roland Wimbledon. Not only did he lead the people to repel the terrifying demonic beasts, but he also invented all kinds of magical machines and tools to improve everyone's lives. Otto witnessed the operation of the black machines in the mining area. 2 of them could do the work that dozens of people could do, and it was extremely easy. There were also the towering iron towers by the Redwater River, which were said to be able to deliver water to the homes of the residents. There were also the rapidly built city walls, residential areas, and docks. Nowadays, ditches were dug everywhere in the town, which seemed to be for the installation of more convenient heating equipment, so that the residents would no longer have to suffer from the cold. He could see such news on the bulletin board in the center of the square every day. What was even more shocking was that most of the townspeople could actually read the official documents posted there. The more he observed, the more incredible it was. The changes in Border Town were everywhere, and they were completely beyond his imagination. Otto opened his notebook, intending to write down today's new discoveries, but his hand holding the pen was suddenly grabbed. He looked up and found 2 patrolmen in black uniforms standing in front of him. Are you Silver Eye? That was the fake name he used when he pretended to be a businessman. Otto responded calmly and looked around, only to find that there were also black uniforms on the other 2 sides of the square, but they did not approach, and their eyes were fixed on him. They were here for him. Otto's heart sank. He had thought that the patrolmen here were different from what he saw outside, and that they were very well behaved. He did not expect that he would get into trouble now. What's the matter? He asked coldly. There was no benefit in currying favor with these greedy people who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Even if it was blackmail, he could not allow them to open their mouths. If he could not get rid of them, he could only use his noble identity. However, the reply of the man in black was completely unexpected to Otto. We received a report that you are suspected of spying. Now put your hands behind your back and act according to the instructions. If you have any intention of resisting, we can't guarantee your safety. Spy. What kind of reason is this? Do they want to find a scapegoat? I don't understand what you said at all. Otto shook off the man's arm. I'm a noble from the Kingdom of Dawn, the Luashi family in the City of Glow. I'm not. Just as he shook off the man's arm, he was suddenly punched in the abdomen. Most of his strength suddenly disappeared. A stream of acid flowed into his mouth, and his body involuntarily curled up. Then the two men pressed him down in the cold snow, and his hands were firmly tied together with a rope. "Noble? You said a few days ago that you were a merchant." One of them sneered. "I told you not to resist." The other man kicked him hard again. "You asked for it. A few days ago?" Could it be that they had been watching him for a long time? That was impossible. At least in the first 2 days, no patrol team had noticed his whereabouts. Ahem. "I'm indeed a noble. There are documents in my bag." Otto struggled, but the man did not budge. "Go and explain to Lord Carter." The two men lifted him up. "If you confess everything, you might be able to live." After a day in prison, Otto, hungry and thirsty, finally saw the man they had been talking about, Lord Carter. Before the man could speak, he grabbed the iron bars and poured out everything he knew. "I'm really Otto Luashi, from the City of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn. I was entrusted by the King of Dawn to come to Grey Castle to seek allies against the Church. I'm not a spy like you said. I want to see your lord, His Highness Roland Wimbledon." He had long heard of the darkness in the prison. The patrol team often colluded with the rats and imprisoned some outsiders as scapegoats. If he was regarded as a lamb with no background, he was afraid that he would never have the chance to see the light of day again. The man was obviously stunned. "I haven't asked anything yet." He tilted his head. "What do you think?" To Otto's surprise, a woman emerged from the shadows. She was shrouded in a white robe, and her face was covered by a hood. But judging from her figure, she was no less beautiful than the flower of glow. "What he said is true," the woman said, spreading out her hands. "Really? So he's really a messenger from the Kingdom of Dawn?" Carter put his hand on his forehead. "It seems that we've caused trouble for His Highness again." Chapter 438. A Genius in a Second to Remember Love? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Otto finally met the legendary Prince Roland of Grey Castle. After confirming that he was indeed a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn, he was taken into the castle by Carter. Then the servants brought him toiletries, new clothes, and hot food. At the same time, Carter searched him from head to toe. This was probably the most rude reception Otto had ever seen. Prince Roland stayed in a room on the 3rd floor of the castle facing the north. When he opened the door, the first thing he saw was a floor-to-ceiling window that took up half of the wall. The snowy scene behind made the room look very bright. Although the fireplace was not lit, the room was extraordinarily warm. The prince sat in front of a mahogany table, flipping through a black leather notebook in his hand. Otto found that it was his notebook. The official documents of the ambassador and the family seal were also on the side. It seemed that the hotel where he lived had been thoroughly searched. His hair color was the same as Timothy's, and his face was somewhat similar, but the feeling he gave off was very different. Whether it was his sitting posture or his expression, he seemed very casual, which somewhat matched the rumor that Prince Roland liked to do things his own way. When he saw Otto, he closed the notebook and smiled. "Are you the messenger from the Kingdom of Dawn? Please sit down." Otto bowed according to the etiquette of the nobles. No matter how badly the other party had behaved, he had to follow the etiquette. After all, Prince Roland might not care much if he was treated as a joke, but he represented the royal family of the Kingdom of Dawn. "I've taken a look at what you've written," the prince said with a smile. "Some aspects are indeed recorded in detail, so it's not surprising that it was misunderstood. Besides, my subjects don't know where you come from. They enthusiastically reported you because of my order. Here, I apologize to you." "Reported? By subjects?" Otto frowned slightly. However, no amount of explanation could absolve a noble from being rudely violated. Not to mention that the other party was a person without a title. If it were not for the heavy responsibility on his shoulders, he would definitely ask His Highness to bring this person to justice. He suppressed the displeasure in his heart and said, "No, Your Highness. You are doing this for the stability of the territory, but this action may hurt those innocent outsiders. Most of them may not be able to produce documents to prove their identity, like I did. You don't have to worry about that. The evidence collected by the Ministry of Justice has nothing to do with identity documents. We have a series of measures to ensure the innocence of the innocent. Prince Roland waved his hand. What do they say? We don't wrongly accuse a good person, but we don't let go of a bad person either. At this point, he raised the corner of his mouth. I've heard about how you were arrested. If you had followed their instructions, you wouldn't have suffered any harm. The process is somewhat rough, but it is also helpless. You must know that some of the most vicious people can pull out a weapon at any time in an attempt to fight back. Since the beginning of winter, 2 policemen in Border Town have been injured while trying to arrest them. Police. He was probably referring to the patrol members. What was the Ministry of Justice? Was it an organization that managed the patrol team? He suppressed the doubts in his heart. Does this happen often? Once or twice a month. His Royal Highness spread out his hands and said, It's probably because of the endless winter. Timothy is bored to death. Love Gobe Small say Netku. He did not hide his hostility to the new king. Otto realized that the contradiction between the two sides was obviously irreconcilable. He hesitated for a moment and said, When I passed by King's City, I heard some rumors among the people. Are you really going to push Timothy off the throne? Are the rumors saying that the new king's throne is in jeopardy? Roland said bluntly. Timothy shouldn't have touched the throne. In order to usurp power, he murdered his father, framed his eldest brother, and drove his third sister out of Grey Castle. The entire southern territory was destroyed by the flames of war, and the people lost their homes. These are all crimes he has committed. Only by overthrowing him can Grey Castle regain its former prosperity. Otto was a little stunned. Roland and Wimbledon's reaction was even worse than the new king's. At least in terms of determination to fight, Timothy was far less active. The positions and momentum of the two seemed to have been reversed. He cleared his throat and continued. In this case, as a friendly neighbor of the Kingdom of Dawn, I hope that Grey Castle can regain its stability as soon as possible. This time, I came with the covenant of the King of Dawn, His Majesty Degan Moya. Oh, the prince said with great interest. Where is it? To avoid leaking the news, I didn't bring one Han with me, but His Majesty granted me the right to sign it myself. Otto repeated the offensive and defensive alliance agreement given by the King of Dawn. If the two countries can work together, we can effectively contain the attack of the Church and avoid repeating the mistakes of the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart. That's it. The prince's response surprised him. What did he mean by that's it? He had clearly made it very clear. When he was about to repeat it, Roland shook his head and said, This plan may not work. The Church's determination to annex the Four Kingdoms is much stronger than you think. Coupled with the outstanding God's Punishment Army and witches, your so-called troops stationed at the border will probably be surrounded and destroyed by the enemy before they can set off. God's Punishment Army and witches. Otto was surprised. It seems that you know nothing about the ambition of the Church. Prince Roland took a sip of tea and said, I'll tell you all the information I know, and I hope you can bring it back to the Kingdom of Dawn so that the king can re-examine this covenant. If we want to defeat the Church, what we need to do is not deterrence, but an all-out attack. The meeting did not end until the evening. When the prince put down his teacup, the field and forest behind him had become dark. The room lit up with a strange light, brighter and purer than candlelight, but Otto was not in the mood to pay attention to it. He felt the cold sweat on his back soaking his clothes. His fingers unconsciously clenched into fists, and his palms were slippery. His mind was filled with His Highness's words. Using wild witches to create extraordinary warriors, secretly training combat witches, pure witches. And the purpose of the Church to destroy the Four Kingdoms at all costs was to prepare for the coming Doomsday War. These pieces of news were simply too unimaginable. But many details matched with the information he had learned, such as the pill of madness used by the Church to weaken the resistance of the Four Kingdoms, the continuous collection of female orphans in carriages to the Holy City, and their attitude toward the defeated nobles. If it was to completely erase the influence of the nobles, and achieve a complete unification of the Church and the kingdom, everything made sense. I can't make a decision, Otto stammered. These things are too important. I have to report to His Majesty. Of course, this concerns the life and death of the two kingdoms, the prince said calmly. We can't be too careful. But don't forget, we don't have much time left. When he was about to leave, Otto walked to the door and turned back hesitantly. Your Highness, I heard that a group of witches has been recruited in Border Town. I wonder if you've heard of the name Andrea. She used to be a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn. Unfortunately, she was stranded in Grey Castle. The prince raised his eyebrows. Why, do you know her? Yes. Otto's heart skipped a beat. Can you let me see her? The prince nodded. I can arrange it for you, but it's up to her whether she will see you or not. Isn't Andrea your? He shook his head with a smile. The witches are just people who live here, not my servants. I can't control their thoughts. Chapter 439. A genius in a second to remember if you like it. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. After Otto Losai left the office, Nightingale's voice came from beside him. What he said wasn't all true, especially about his experience before coming to Border Town. It's not strange, he must have arrived in King's City first, and after negotiating with Timothy, he turned to the Western Territory. Roland smiled. If he had come straight to me from the beginning, then it would be strange. Diplomats like to bet on both sides. If it were me, I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. You mean, they won't necessarily be on our side? At least not right away. He fetched a pot of hot water and refilled the teacup. How much do you think the King of Dawn will believe after receiving this information? Nightingale was stunned for a long time. I don't know. I don't know either. As soon as Roland finished speaking, he was pinched on the shoulder. But one thing is obvious. This information sounds terrible, but it will happen several years later. We can't even give an exact date. However, the threat of the church is right in front of us. Perhaps they will take action at the beginning of spring. Therefore, the King of Dawn will not side with us because of this information. In all likelihood, he will continue to watch from the sidelines until the winner between me and Timothy is decided. If he has the strength to spare, he may even give benefits to both sides in order to seek for future returns. This was also a common tactic of politicians. They were unwilling to take too many risks and preferred to reap benefits in a stable way, especially when it came to investment projects with high returns like war. If there were no demons, Roland would not be averse to deep contact with them. He would lay a trap for them to jump into and then collect more debts with interest. But now he was not in the mood to play this kind of diplomatic game with the other side. In the next year, Border Town must take the initiative to attack and quickly stabilize the situation. A storm was about to sweep through, and the fish that were still fighting for food in the pond could only die. Then, will you tell them the information? Nightingale was puzzled. At least the Kingdom of Dawn is not our real enemy. I don't know how much the nobles will believe about the demons, but they will definitely spread the news about the church's ambition, which will weaken the foundation of the church's rule, Roland explained. Once they lose the support of the people, it will not be easy for the church to quickly use the kingdom's resources. Although he had told Otto all the information he knew, in fact, he only revealed the part about the existence of demons to Otto. He did not tell Otto about the Witch Empire and the first two battles of divine will. The former was even more unbelievable than the existence of the demons, and it might even have the opposite effect. Because most of the people were hostile to witches, this kind of thing might be twisted into a witches' conspiracy, with just a little guidance. The latter could easily destroy people's confidence to fight against demons. If they failed in the first two times, what chance did they have? In short, the seeds of cooperation against the enemy had been sown. As for whether they could reap results, it all depended on the reaction of the Kingdom of Dawn. 3 days later, Roland met Otto Losai again. From the disappointment in his eyes, he could guess the answer to the meeting. I prefer to form an alliance with you. But compared to discussing the details of the alliance, the most important thing now is to send the news back to the Kingdom of Dawn as soon as possible. He put his hand on his chest and bowed. So I'm here to bid you farewell. I hope to hear good news from you. Roland nodded. By the way, Your Highness. Otto hesitated for a moment. I have a presumptuous request. What is it? Please take care of Andrea Quinn for me. Andrea is a witch of Sleeping Island. You should ask Tilly Wimbledon instead of me. Roland sighed and agreed. Standing at the top of the castle, Andrea faced the howling cold wind and looked to the south, where the Redwater River flowed. Aren't you going to the dock? Hiding behind an invisible barrier, Shavy shivered in the cold. I heard that he's going to leave on a ship soon. As his childhood playmate, it's only right for me to send him off. It's the same here. She let out a long sigh. I heard from Ashes that he can't forget you. Only 1 out of 10 of her words can be trusted, Andrea said grumpily. She even praised him in front of Lady Tilly for being so consistent. A dog's mouth can never utter ivory. Is that so? Shavy's teeth chattered. That's right. She snorted and then looked at Andrea, who was curled up into a ball. If you feel cold, you can go down first. You can come back to pick me up later. It's okay. I'll wait for you here. Shavy shook her head. Anyway, if I catch a cold, Miss Lily will treat me. I can take a couple of days off and play a few more games of cards. Andrea gave her a thumbs up, and then shifted her gaze to the Redwater River. In the drifting snowflakes, she vaguely saw the raised sails, and a red dot swaying slightly at the top of the mast. That was the signal to set sail. That's good, she thought. Time will dilute everything. Forgetting is a better result for everyone. Andrea was not completely unaware of Otto's feelings, but she still chose to avoid it. Regardless of whether it was him or Orticat, with their status in the family, they could easily marry a more suitable woman instead of wasting their time on a witch. As one of the 3 most prominent noble families in the city of Glow, such a relationship was bound to be fruitless. Besides, she was not willing to return to the place that had abandoned her. Not seeing him was the best choice. Goodbye, my friend, Andrea thought. The faintly discernible sail soon disappeared at the end of her vision. After the messenger's matter came to an end, Roland immediately threw himself into the construction of Border Town. Now the water supply, heating, and power supply project had officially started. The 3 pipelines were all buried underground and led directly to each residential area. Since the residential buildings had been designed with openings in mind, the entry part was very simple. The key was the location of the boiler and the water tower. Chapter 440. According to the construction plan, Roland arranged an equipment room at each well point to accommodate all the equipment needed for the 3 connections for ease of management. The whole set of equipment included a steam engine, an electric motor, a power supply, a boiler, and 2 water tanks. Together with the water tower outside the room, the whole 3 connection system was formed. The steam engine was responsible for pumping the water from the well to the water tower and the water tank. The former was mainly used for domestic water supply, while the latter was used for heating water for the boiler. The first-level water tank was higher than the ground, with limestone and washing stones suspended in it to soften the water by precipitating magnesium and calcium ions in the water. The purified water would be directed to the second-level water tank, which was located lower, and any floating objects in the water would be blocked by Soroya's special filter mesh. The water supply to the boiler was done by the electric motor. When the internal water level was too low, the float valve would be activated, and the electric motor would start to pump water until the water level returned to normal. This process was much more stable than adding water manually or using the steam engine, and it also eliminated the need for people to observe at all times. Since the water supply and heating system had been verified in advance, there was naturally no difficulty in the construction. The key was the power supply system, which was the first time for the town. Neither Carr nor the other members of the Mason Guild knew anything about electricity, so Roland planned to make a small model in the yard first, and then explain it to the Ministry of Construction after it was successful. After all, he did not know much about electricity, and his knowledge of circuits was basically at the high school level. With a reliable and stable power supply, the first step should be to create a qualified electrical equipment, namely a light bulb. Thinking of this, Roland put on a thick coat and set out for the backyard of North Slope Mountain. Traveling through the mist of Nightingale, it took him only 3 or 4 minutes to reach the destination, which should have taken a quarter of an hour. When he opened the wooden door, Anna and Lucia immediately noticed him. But Anna was busy with her work and only nodded at him, while Lucia ran to him happily. "Your Highness, good morning." "Good morning." Roland nodded with a smile, then walked to Anna and asked, "What are you busy with?" "A new barrel and locking mechanism." She pointed to several long steel barrels on the table seriously. "Your drawings are a bit unreasonable, so I think it would be better to make some changes." "Nah." Roland could not help but reach out to touch her head, but she shook her head and refused. He seemed to have seen this scene somewhere before. He coughed twice, restrained his teasing mood, and said, "Well, do it your way." Roland did not mind her questioning his design. After all, he had deduced the gun blueprint based on the theory. It was normal for there to be mistakes and room for improvement. Moreover, Anna's learning talent and comprehension ability were far better than his. He felt that one day, her understanding of knowledge would reach a level that even he could not reach. After a while, Anna put down the parts in her hands, walked to Roland. Roland could not help but be surprised. Is she going to make up for the previous touch? He tried to rub her soft hair, and Anna raised her head in satisfaction. "Do you have something new you want to try out?" Yes." The prince looked at Lucia. "How is the separation of the messy ores in the mine going?" "It's basically done. The results are all here." Lucia handed him a stack of books. "But I'm afraid it will take a long time to test the mixing of the ores with the steel, because there are too many simple elements that have been separated." "It's already very good to be able to do this," Roland said approvingly. This was also an extension of the material improvement plan. Compared with the previous control of the carbon content and the elimination of impurities to obtain high-quality steel, the elements involved now had expanded to the resources that the entire North Slope mine could provide. There were not many tricks in this part of the content, but only a little bit of experimentation. Roland spread out the books, checked the characteristics of the various unknown minerals in the yard, and soon found the element with the highest melting point. He pointed to the column marked test item number 12. "Where is this ore?" Lucia immediately found the test samples, which were sealed in a transparent coating bag. One was a raw stone, and the other was a bag of decomposed elementary particles. As for the black raw stone, Roland felt that he had seen it somewhere before. "Wait, isn't it the same as the black stone that was sent to my office before?" Ever since he handed it over to the alchemist, he had forgotten about it and never paid attention to it again. But it turned out to be the mineral with the highest melting point in the North Slope Mountain. In the record book, Anna could not accurately mark the specific value of the melting point, so she could only use words to describe it. Between ordinary, high and relatively high, only its characteristics were written as extremely high. As for the bag of elementary particles, they were silver-white like most of the metal elements, and there was nothing different about them. "Is this thing tungsten?" "But it doesn't matter, as long as it is difficult to melt." Roland asked Anna to process it into a very fine metal wire, twist it into a spiral shape, and fix it on the glass shelf. Then he put the shelf into the glass bulb, and the main part of the electric lamp was completed. Of course, there were still 2 steps to make it stable, and this was also the most difficult part of the lamp technology. The first step was to vacuum it to prevent oxygen from reacting with the filament, and the second was to seal it to prevent air from entering the lamp. Without a doubt, these 2 steps could only be done by witches. The first thing Roland did was to find Agatha. The main reason for vacuum was that the filament would become extremely active under high temperature, and it was easy to oxidize and produce new oxides, which would cause the filament to melt. To achieve this effect, filling the filament with non-reactive gas would be equally effective, or even better. And pure nitrogen was an excellent filler. Using the principle that nitrogen was lighter than air, a simple downward exhaust method could easily fill the lamp with nitrogen, which was much simpler than the vacuum step. When nitrogen was also discharged from the other end, and Soroya was responsible for sealing it, a simple incandescent lamp was completed. Looking at the palm-sized electric lamp in his hand, Roland's heart was filled with emotion. This thing, which had been eliminated in the future, now represented the highest level of production in Border Town. The next night, he summoned all the members of the city hall to the front yard of the castle, and at the same time ordered the guards to extinguish the torches in the yard. In the snowy night, when dusk covered everything, Roland turned off the switch of the circuit. In an instant, an orange-yellow light lit up in the center of the courtyard. It was not like a candle that would be extinguished in the cold wind, nor was it like a bonfire that flickered. The illumination range was not large, only about a few meters, but the stable light in the wind was something that people had never seen before. At this time, there was no need for any explanation. The people's unblinking expressions and the quiet scene explained everything. Chapter 441. Brother Vader is this really okay? Firehead touched his clothes uneasily. Chief Knight said that the uniform is a symbol of our identity. We have to wear it neatly when we're on duty. And we'll be punished if we get it dirty, not to mention that we're not wearing it at all. Whistle kept looking around as if he was afraid of being seen by his peers. Don't be long-winded. Wearing it is enough of a symbol. If you stand in the snow in midwinter, people will know that there are policemen hundreds of steps away. How can you arrest people then? Vader spat. You're from Border Town, right? Yes. At the mention of this, both of them suddenly became spirited. My father is a hunter who used to live in the old street. He's very skilled. He can even shoot a fox in the neck with an arrow. Me too. My father always says that hunting is not stable and that it's better to go mining. He even prepared a hoe for me. If His Highness hadn't become the Lord, I'm afraid I would have to stay in the mine. I can see that. Vader shrugged. Only the children of a hunter's family would have such a strange nickname. Since you're from Border Town, you should be more concerned about the order of the town than an outsider like me, right? Even I'm not afraid of punishment. What are you afraid of? Is it more important than upholding the rules set by His Highness? This. The two hesitated for a moment, and then said as if they had made up their minds. You're right. Brother Vader, you're not an outsider anymore. Haven't you already got your ID card? His Highness said that those who get this card are all his subjects, Whistle muttered. Vader smiled and said no more. He continued to stare at the row of caves on the east side of the temporary area. It had been nearly 3 months since he became a policeman, and he had completely adapted to life in the western region. He originally thought that the patrols would have nothing to do without extortion or fraud, but he didn't expect that they would be so busy every day. The police were needed to receive refugees, deal with civil disputes, and even catch those vicious criminals and spies. Apart from fighting demonic beasts, the First Army didn't interfere with the security operations in Border Town at all. This was very different from what he had expected. In Valencia, the patrol team was more or less a supplement to the city guards. They had to do some of the dirty and tiring work, but they did not get many benefits. That was why many members of the patrol team were used to looking for extra money. But in Border Town, the police and the First Army were more like separate systems, the former for internal affairs, while the latter for external affairs. What made Vader even more astonished was that apart from the direct orders from their superiors, their targets were actually reported by the citizens. That's right, the townspeople had changed Vader's view of ordinary people. These lazy and stupid people would actually take the initiative to keep an eye on suspicious people and report them to City Hall. Every time a foreign merchant ship arrived in town, the Ministry of Justice would receive 5 or 6 such reports. Very quickly, Vader realized the enormous power contained within. No spy could completely avoid contact with the outside world, or completely blend in with the natives the moment they arrived at a certain place, unless they had grown up in that place. When everyone became a vigilant sentry post, what enemy could hide themselves? Of course, not every capture would yield results. For example, the sneaky person they caught the last time turned out to be a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn. Vader was prepared to be punished, but there was no response from the higher-ups, as if they had turned a blind eye to his beating of a noble. This further strengthened his view. Gold has appeared. Firehead exclaimed in a low voice. Don't worry about him. Just pretend to sweep the snow, Vader said calmly. He didn't bring any goods. He's just here to investigate the situation. Gold was the code name of the target. 2 days ago, the Ministry of Justice received a report that serfs were smuggling grain. Lord Carter attached great importance to the matter and immediately assigned the task to Vader, asking him to catch both the person and the goods, calling it a gold hunt. However, the task did not proceed smoothly. After some inquiries, they initially locked on to the target. 5 or 6 people took turns to monitor the temporary residential area for 2 days, but in the end, they did not even find a trace of the target. Vader was clear that the reason for the lack of progress was that the police uniforms were too conspicuous here. He had lived in the Western District for a long time before, so he naturally knew that as long as a City Hall official appeared, the news would quickly spread. The Eastern District was not much better. The people living here were all serfs, and their black uniforms were as eye-catching as fireflies in the night sky. Therefore, he simply persuaded Firehead and Whistle to take off their uniforms, put on a tattered coat, and disguise themselves as snow sweepers, blocking the main road between the Eastern District and border town. As long as there was a suspicious person passing by, it would definitely not escape their eyes. After circling around the Eastern District, Gold returned to the cave. However, when it reappeared, it was carrying a large cloth bag on its back. He really is smuggling wheat. Whistle clenched his fist. Damn it, he simply doesn't care about His Highness's words, Firehead said angrily. Let's arrest him now. Don't worry. Vader waved his hand. Didn't Lord Carter say that we want both the person and the goods to be caught? We'll act in 3 groups. Vader ordered according to the previous plan to trap the rats. Firehead, you set off now and first go to the area around the old city wall. If he wants to enter the inner city, there's only one way for him to go. Okay. Next, I'll follow him. This requires a certain level of skill, so I'm the most suitable. He licked his lips. Finally, Whistle. Keep a distance of about 100 steps from me, and slowly keep an eye on him. Just don't make eye contact with Gold. Got it? Then let's begin. Although the 3 of them did not have a hierarchy, they still obeyed Vader's instructions. Vader shouldered the broom and calmly walked 3 or 4 steps in front of Gold. According to his past experience, following from behind would easily arouse the target's vigilance. However, if he were to lead the way in front, it would greatly reduce the target's vigilance. If he could roughly figure out the area the target wanted to go to, this kind of accompanying method was the most reliable. His attention was completely focused on Gold. As long as there was even the slightest change in the other party's footsteps, he was confident that he could pounce on him within a few breaths. After passing through the gap in the old city wall, Gold stopped and leaned against a corner of the street to rest. Obviously, the other party also knew that if he continued to walk towards the center of the town, the chances of encountering the police would greatly increase. Vader took a few more steps forward and turned into a fork in the road, waiting for the buyer to appear. Not long after, a townsman pushing a small cart appeared. Similarly, he looked left and right for a while before slowly making his way to the side of the serf. After opening the cloth bag and inspecting it, the townsman took out a handful of coins from his bosom. At the same time, Vader gestured for them to take action. The 3 of them rushed towards the target from 3 different directions. The trader was immediately dumbfounded and stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. Chapter 442. When Roland learned of this matter, he was studying the layout of the residential area's power grid. After listening to Carter's report, he put down his quill and sighed. Although he knew that such a day would inevitably come, he still felt a little helpless when it really happened. After all, the ban on selling grain privately had been repeatedly announced, but there were still people who would take the risk for a little money. Obviously, this was the first case of this kind, so it was natural to give a heavy sentence. In addition, he had to improve all kinds of laws as soon as possible, and then recruit specialized law officers to interrogate and judge the case. After all, after the city was built, there would only be more and more crimes, and he had no time to act as a judge all day long. The trial was finally decided to be held in the castle hall. Roland also summoned Barov, the director, to the castle to jointly try the grain smuggling crime. In the hall, 2 arrested suspects were kneeling on the ground, pale and with dull eyes. It seemed that they had never experienced such a scene. After Roland sat in the main seat, he cleared his throat and said, "Tell me everything you have done. Any concealment or lies will add to your crimes." "Yes, yes, sir." The 2 of them seemed to wake up from a dream and scrambled to tell the story of the grain trafficking. The serf in particular almost shouted himself hoarse. "His Royal Highness, Sir Lord, I know I am guilty, but if I don't sell the wheat, I really can't live. Those officials didn't buy the wheat according to your requirements, and I had no choice but to do so." The whole case was very simple, and halfway through, Roland had already sorted out the clues. In order to calm people's hearts, the city hall set a grain purchase limit that was slightly higher than the actual consumption, so there would always be a small amount of wheat left for the townspeople, who bought the maximum amount every month. Parker, who lived in the 6th residential area, seized a business opportunity. He ground the extra wheat into coarse flour, mixed it with some wild vegetables he picked himself, made it into fragrant pancakes, and sold them in the market. As a result, he found that they sold well. This was also another major function of the convenience market, which limited the trading to staple foods, while the chickens, ducks, and eggs raised by the townspeople could be sold at their own stalls. This business could bring him several silver royals every month, but there was only so much wheat left. If he wanted to expand, he had to be frugal. So Parker set his sights on the serfs who did not sell all the grain to the city hall. After several inquiries, he contacted Gold, and then there was this smuggling case. But the serf's last sentence made Roland frown. What did he mean by the officials didn't buy wheat according to the regulations? Was it related to the city hall? He looked at Barov, who leaned over and whispered, "The Ministry of Agriculture is in charge of the acquisition, and the minister is Sirius Daly. It's unlikely that he would make such a mistake. You can call him over and ask him." Roland nodded and had the guards summon the Minister of Agriculture to the castle. Sirius Daly quickly arrived at the hall. After making a standard knight's salute, he inquired about His Highness' orders. He still had the demeanor of a former Wolf family knight. The prince explained the unclear parts of the case. "Did you refuse to buy serfs' food?" "Reporting to your highness, the situation is like this," Sirius answered without the slightest hesitation. "In accordance with your instructions, after the bumper harvest, we did not stop the purchase work, but gradually reduced the purchase price according to the quality of the wheat. In the first 2 months, the price was almost the same as the original price." He paused for a moment, then continued, "However, after winter, most of the serfs lacked suitable storage space, coupled with the fact that they moved from the original shanty towns to the temporary residential area. The quality of the wheat declined significantly. When we purchase, we can often find damp, discolored, moldy food, so the price is 20 to 30% lower than at the beginning. Most of this serf's food has been damp and moldy, and it is almost impossible to continue to store it. Therefore, the price I offered is 20% of the harvest price. 20% is no different from not buying, Your Highness." The serf shouted, "I've been working in the fields for a year, and the things I've grown can only be sold at this price. It's even more ruthless than the Black Street. Didn't you say that the price of grain would remain unchanged?" "That's referring to paying on time, idiot." Barov scolded in displeasure. "Do you think no one knows your real purpose for hoarding wheat? If there is a problem with the town's food supply, I'm afraid you can sell it at 3 or 4 times the original price." At this point, the case was completely clear, but the result made Roland slightly surprised. He had originally thought that it was just a simple case of smuggling grain, but he did not expect that it would involve a case of black-hearted food. Parker clearly knew that the quality of this batch of grain was poor, but he still agreed to buy it multiple times at 50% of the original price. It was likely that he did not care whether the moldy wheat was edible or not. What the serfs had committed was undoubtedly a felony, but the sentence given by the townsman Parker made it somewhat difficult for Roland to make a decision. He had heard from Scroll about the lives of the poor. When these people lacked food, let alone moldy black bread, even tree trunks and grass could be used to satisfy their hunger. It was precisely because of this that Scroll repeatedly emphasized how great it was to be able to let all the subjects eat wheat. Parker was also a poor person before, so he probably did not realize that using inferior grain to make wheat cakes was a crime. After discussing with Barra for a moment, Roland finally made a verdict. He stood up, looked around, and said in a deep voice, "I pronounce, too guilty." The serfs violated the ban by selling grain privately and knowingly. Their crime is one level higher, and they are sentenced to 10 years of mine labor. If their subsequent performance is good, the length of service may be reduced at their discretion. Parker, a resident of the town, also violated the ban by using inferior wheat to make pancakes and selling them to other townsmen. Both crimes are punished together. In addition to 10 years of labor, a fine of 3 times the profit from the pancakes will be imposed. The above sentence will be carried out immediately. The two people's bodies went limp and they involuntarily collapsed to the ground. The guards standing at the side immediately came forward and dragged them out of the hall. The prince then ordered Sirius, "Write this matter into a notice and give it to Barov to review and publicize it. I want all the subjects to understand the cause and effect of this case and prevent such things from happening again." "Yes, Your Highness." After the trial was over, Roland called Chief Knight Carter to his office. "I heard that the arresting person this time is Vader again?" Carter nodded. "But this time they went a little overboard. They took off their police uniforms and went to arrest people. In the process, they were even reported by the people as fighting. I'll give him a warning." "That won't be necessary. In fact, you should praise him," Roland said while stroking his chin. "Isn't this a plainclothes policeman? He knows how to be flexible and has experience in arresting criminals. He used to be a patrol member and has a good understanding of the forces of the Blackstreet. He's simply a natural talent for supervision." Chapter 443. In the secret chamber of the Tower of Babel in the Hermes Cathedral, Tayfun looked at the witch in front of him and could not help but sigh. Does His Excellency Main really have no time? Of course. The witch stroked her golden curly hair. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent me to attend the meeting. Let me introduce myself. I'm Isabella, a pure witch of His Holiness. Sir Tayfun this. The other 2 new bishops, Solidal from the Judgment Army and El from the Arbitral Tribunal, looked at each other in dismay. Although they knew that the church had a group of secret witches, they did not expect that they could also participate in such a high-level meeting. She's a direct subordinate of the Pope. Her position is equal to that of a bishop, but she doesn't hold any actual position in the church, Tayfun explained helplessly. In addition, bishops can also have their own pure witches. After this year's months of demons, you can choose a few witches to train. I see. Soli's eyes widened. Then, what kind of abilities do they have? This is top secret. Only His Holiness knows. Why do we train witches? El looked quite dissatisfied. If the believers find out, the reputation of the church may be seriously affected. Of course, it's to help you complete some shady tasks. Isabella raised her eyebrows. Apart from that, I can also accompany you to sleep, vent my anger, or play some other tricks. You know, the taste of a witch is incomparable to that of an ordinary woman. Ridiculous. Ahem, that's enough. Tayfun coughed twice. Sir El, I said that the pure witch of the Pope is equal to the bishop. As an agent, she can even be regarded as His Holiness himself. You should know the most basic manners. And Lady Isabella, please don't make such a joke. They're not like an old man with one foot in the coffin. I won't take it seriously when I'm angry. As you wish, my lord, Isabella said with a smile. Umph. El snorted and ignored her. Then let's get down to business first. Tayfun stroked his beard. Do you have anything to report? I don't understand why His Holiness Main suddenly asked all the churches to escort the captured witches back to the Holy City. Even if it's just for transforming the God's punishment army, we've already paid a heavy price. El was the first to speak. Probably because she was angry at the pure witch, her tone was rather stiff. Since this order was issued, we have captured a total of 3 witches. However, during the secret escort, One of them escaped from the cage and killed all the escorts. We still haven't found her whereabouts. No caller? Asked Soli. Not all churches are equipped with the most advanced God's locket of retribution, El said angrily. Because of this witch, we lost 16 believers, 4 of whom were judgment warriors. If this kind of thing happens a few more times, I'm afraid everyone will be afraid of capturing witches. However, we all know that combat witches are only a small part of the population. Most of the fallen don't have the ability to resist, so this kind of thing is bound to be uncommon, Isabella said in a relaxed tone. And every time you bring back a wild witch, there may be 2 more scourge for the church. I don't think I need to elaborate on which one is more important, do I? I agree with Lady Isabella. Soli nodded. Now that the Hermes defense line is under increasing pressure, we urgently need more God's punishment army to fight against the demonic beasts. A God's punishment army is enough to replace 3 or 4 judgment warriors on the battlefield, not to mention the reserve army. Since His Holiness has made a decision, we just need to carry it out. Taifun turned to Soli Dal and asked, how's the situation in the defense line? Very difficult. The ordinary hybrids are easy to deal with, but the fearful beasts of hell are difficult. Every time they appear, a scourge will be injured or sacrificed. Soli shook his head. The method of burying snow powder in advance and then detonating it is good, but we can't guarantee that it will pass over the snow powder every time. His Holiness has also considered this, Isabella said bluntly. He plans to use the siege beasts in advance. What's that? A kind of siege weapon controlled by a pure witch. Its range, accuracy, and power are far better than that of a catapult. And it's also the trump card to conquer the kingdom of Wolfheart. The pure witch explained. The siege beasts are originally used to deal with demons and giant demonic beasts. Since the fearful beasts of hell have appeared in advance, it should be dragged out of the pivotal secret area. Why didn't we use it from the beginning? Soli was puzzled. Because of the wear and tear. Isabella shrugged. We can't build a new one, so we can only repair it locally. Then where did it come from? El asked with a frown. This is confidential. You have no right to know. Seeing that there was a silence in the secret room, Taifun clapped his hands and broke the silence. Well, since all of you have brought is bad news, let me share a piece of good news. Except for a few cities in the kingdom of Wolfheart that are still resisting, the nobles in the other places have already surrendered to us, just like those fence-sitters in the kingdom of Everwinter. More and more believers have joined the church. By next summer, the holy city's various resource income will double, and so will the scale of the Judgment Army. In addition, the Kingdom of Dawn has also caused a riot due to the wanton expulsion of believers. My people are secretly helping them fight against the suppressed nobles. It's estimated that they can hold on until the end of the months of demons. Finally, there's some positive news. El exhaled a white breath. I thought the church was finished just now. What nonsense are you talking about? Soli glared at her. Aren't we progressing steadily according to the plan? Well done. Isabella nodded approvingly. She then glanced at the 3 people one by one. Since you've finished, I'll explain the new decree of His Holiness. The 3 archbishops immediately looked at the pure witch. His Holiness wants to adjust the direction of attack next year. The priority will be to capture Grey Castle, and the Kingdom of Dawn will be the last. What? Soli Dal was startled. But all the previous plans were made for the Kingdom of Dawn, including the mobilization of materials and supplies. If we change the plan now, I'm afraid the date of attack will be greatly delayed. Wasn't this the order planned by Lord O'Brien when he was in power? Why do we need to change it now? I was also very puzzled. The 2 kingdoms will be destroyed sooner or later. Is it necessary to pay attention to who comes first? Taifun did not say anything. When His Holiness Maine asked him to send the pure witches to Grey Castle to make arrangements for the western region, he had a premonition of this change. His Holiness's intention was not in the king's city of Grey Castle, but in the border area. After the 2 people stopped talking, he said in a low voice, I have no opinion on the decree itself, but it does involve a lot of things. Before implementing it, I want to see His Holiness Maine. I wonder if you can pass on the message for me? Chapter 444. Taifun felt an inexplicable chill as he walked down the stone steps of the sinkhole. At the bottom of this quiet and deep church was the church's most important secret, the Hermes mechanism. It was the first time he had set foot in this place. Did His Holiness Main really let me come here to see him? According to convention, only the Archbishop who was regarded as the successor of the Pope was qualified to enter the pivotal secret mechanism. He was too old to take over Main's position. You've served the Church for so many years and worked together, so His Holiness trusts you very much, Isabella said with a smile. Moreover, the past rules are not suitable for the upcoming war. The will of God should not be buried underground. It needs to be revealed to all the lost believers and lead us to the final challenge. This is His Holiness's idea? Yes, she said softly. After entering the mechanism, 2 Judgment Army soldiers came to greet him. Your Excellency, His Holiness is presiding over the Magic Stone experiment. If you have a God Stone of retaliation with you, please hand it over to me for the time being. It may affect the operation of magic power. Taifun nodded and handed a God Stone necklace to them. His Holiness is here. Please follow me. Isabella turned into a long passage and pushed open the iron door at the end. With a harsh squeak, Taifun saw another pure witch with her face covered. She blocked the door like a ghost. Her white skin could be seen under the black veil that wrapped her body. It seemed that she was naked except for the veil. The most eye-catching thing was the witch's eyes, which were different from ordinary people's pupils. Her eyes were a dull silver gray, and there seemed to be a whirlpool spinning in them. If one looked at them for a long time, they would be sucked in. Taifun lowered his head subconsciously. Only then did he notice that the witch was not wearing shoes. Instead, her feet were covered with a bright red dot on each of her well-proportioned toes. The bishop could not help but think of the saying, "The taste of a witch is incomparable to that of an ordinary woman." Damn it, are these witches all goblins? He quickly moved his slender feet away and heard Isabella's reminder. Your Excellency? Ahem. Taifun collected his thoughts and walked into the house. The room wasn't big, and the rosin torches hanging on the walls were burning vigorously, but he didn't smell the familiar sweet fragrance. 4 pure witches sat around a stone table, fiddling with a pile of glittering and translucent stones. Beside the stone table stood the current Pope, His Holiness Main. Taifun was just about to kneel and kowtow when Main caught his arm. There are no outsiders here, so there's no need to be so formal, he said with a smile. We are old acquaintances, Lord Taifun. It had only been 2 months since they last met, but Main's forehead already had a few more wrinkles, and there were a few strands of silver in his hair. However, his tone was still as familiar as before, without the slightest arrogance. You can't do that. Taifun suddenly felt a surge of warmth in his heart. Even if there are no other believers, I have to follow the order of the Church. And what I said is order. The Pope smiled disapprovingly. Let's not talk about this. How's the situation up there? I originally planned to ask Isabella to convey your message, but since you're here, tell me about it. Yes, Your Holiness. Taifun nodded. After describing the current situation of the Church, he talked about the last order Isabella mentioned. Right now, we're preparing resources for the Kingdom of Dawn. I'm afraid it will take a lot of effort to mobilize them again. Why did you suddenly decide to attack Grey Castle first? That's the main reason I called you here. Main sighed. Grey Castle is now showing signs of decline. The order for the selection of Crown Prince and the Pill of Madness have achieved the desired effect, and the Kingdom of Dawn is in civil strife. Their destruction is only a matter of time, so it doesn't make much difference who attacks first. I think so too, but Grey Castle is still a huge opponent. There are 2 main reasons why I decided to change the attack plan. The Pope said slowly with his hands clasped behind his back. The first reason is basically the same as your concern. Grey Castle has the largest territory and the richest resources. It's a huge enemy, but it also means a huge reward. If we can convert it into the territory of the Church soon, the benefits will be much greater than occupying the Kingdom of Dawn. If we had 10 years, I would definitely carry out the plan set by Lord O'Brien, but we don't have much time. The appearance of the fearful beast of hell means that the bloody moon may appear much closer than the date mentioned in the Holy Book. At this time, it's worth taking some risks and making more sacrifices. Taifun nodded slightly. This reason was indeed good, but the problem was, it did not seem like Maine's style. Then your second reason is Roland Wimbledon of the Western region, the Pope said decisively. You mean Prince Roland of Greycastle? He could not help but be startled. Based on the information we gathered over the past year, I discovered something incredible. Maine patted the bishop's shoulder. Whether it was the church's actions against him, or the kingdom of Greycastle's actions against him, they all failed without exception. The first failure can be traced back to the Duke of the Western region's attack on his territory. At that time, what did Roland have? Nothing but a rundown town. Outsiders think that he surrendered to the demons and defeated the Duke's Knight group. But we all know that, except for extraordinaries, one or two witches are no threat to a fully armed knight equipped with God's stones of retaliation. Later, the information became more and more unbelievable. For example, in a secret letter sent to the Holy City 2 months ago, the new King Timothy once sent nearly 2,000 crazed soldiers to attack the Western region, but they were defeated immediately. What does this mean? Taifun could not help but gasp. 2,000 crazed soldiers. Even in Hermes, they were still a force to be reckoned with. If we look at the information separately, we might not find anything, but when put together, it's very shocking. Roland Wimbledon has never been defeated in a war, the Pope said in a deep voice. And from the information, we can see that his power is growing at an amazing speed, and there's a tendency to expand outwards. If this drags on for another year, the entire Grey Castle may fall into his hands. At that time, I'm afraid that if we want to annex this vast land, we'll have to pay a much greater price. He paused and looked at Taifun. There are many things to deal with in the agency. I have no time to take care of the operation and expansion of the church, so I can only entrust these matters to you. After the Archbishop left, the appearance of the room also changed. The torches on the wall disappeared. And so did the pure witch who was studying the magic stone and the stone table. The figure of the Pope gradually faded away, and finally, only Isabella, Zero, and the black-veiled woman were left. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known that Prince Roland of Greycastle is such an interesting person. Isabella smacked her lips. Why do I think he's more likely to defeat the demons than the church? What do you mean? The black-veiled woman frowned. Do you want to betray the church? Betray? Don't make it sound so bad. Isabella shrugged. Isn't the purpose of the church to ensure the survival of human beings in the battle of divine will? If someone else can do it, I don't mind serving them. You. Chapter 445. West of Greycastle, north of Longsong's stronghold. Sir Schilt sat by the fireplace with a serious look on his face. Yesterday evening, after Miso Schilt left the mansion, there was no news of him, and he did not return until the next morning. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Recently, Miso had been very close to several big families in the Western region, and the Honeysuckle family, which was in charge of Stronghold, had also released the news that His Highness planned to integrate the Western region. At that time, all territories would adopt the same law, and at the same time, the great nobles' power of enfeoffment would be taken back, which meant that they could not expand their own lower nobles, nor could they recruit a knight to fight for them. As for small nobles like Schilt, it did not have much impact, and even had a lot of benefits. After all, according to the news, as long as they were loyal to His Highness, they would be rewarded handsomely. So at this time, the small nobles became the most stable group. Whether His Highness' reform plan was successful or not, they could accept it. So the wisest thing to do was to wait and see. But Miso Schilt did not think so. Master, the attendant who went out to look for the second young master has returned, the butler said as he pushed open the door of Sir's study. How is it, did you find him? No, the butler shook his head. I have searched the taverns, casinos, theaters, and brothels in Stronghold, but still did not find any trace of the young master. Sir Schilt was a little anxious. The people who were sent to look for Miso were divided into two groups. The first group went to the small noble territories nearby. Most of them were knight and feft by Duke Ryan, and their status was equivalent to their own family, so Miso often went to these territories to attend some parties and dinners. The second group went to the entertainment places in Stronghold, which were also popular places for young nobles. Seeing that both groups of people returned empty-handed, Sir's bad feeling became stronger and stronger. He got up and walked to the window, looking to the east of the territory. After crossing two territories of Sir, it was the territory of the Elk family, which was also the largest Earl territory in the western region. Ever since the fall of the Duke of Ryan, and the Perot of the Honeysuckle family had completely sided with Prince Roland, the Elk family had vaguely become the leader of the resistance against the prince. Damn it, Miso couldn't have gone there, right? Master, second young master is back. Suddenly, a servant ran into the study. He's changing in the hall. It seems like he's about to leave. What? Sir immediately grabbed the crutch beside him, ignoring the butler's dissuasion, and quickly walked downstairs. As soon as he stepped into the hall, Schilt suddenly felt a buzz in his head. He saw Miso take off his thick coat and change into a thin, soft leather coat. In front of him was a set of shiny knight armor. The two subordinates were currently bustling about, preparing the final steps of putting on the armor. Where did you go yesterday? The old sir could not help shouting. What are you going to do now? Father, here's our chance, Miso said excitedly. The chance to be promoted from the lowest knight to the baron. Or even the viscount. Schilt felt his blood boiling. Who told you that? Sir Jacques Med, he brought His Majesty's secret order. Oh no. Schilt could not help but take 2 steps back, his heart sinking to the bottom. Jacques Med was the eldest son of the Elk family, not to mention that the new King Timothy was involved. Everyone knew that the enemy Timothy wanted to eradicate the most was Roland Wimbledon, who was in charge of the western region. The last thing he wanted to happen had happened, and it seemed to be more serious than he had imagined. You. What on earth did you hear? Sir Med summoned most of the nobles of the western region to his castle, and announced His Majesty's handwritten document, which stated that as long as they helped him capture Longsong's stronghold, everyone's title and territory would be promoted by 1 level. Miso seemed still immersed in the grand scene. Lady Miriam of the Wild Rose family, Lord Cavan of the Maple family, and Lord Reminoa of the Wolf family all put their fingerprints on the document without hesitation and swore to serve His Majesty. The rest of the nobles and knight also decided to follow the 4 big families, and remove the Honeysuckle family's rule over Longsong's stronghold. How stupid! How could the 4 big families make a decision on the spot just because of a document? Sir sighed inwardly. Did you forget that when the Duke of Ryan was still the guardian of the western region, these people were perfunctory about the Edict of Wimbledon III? When did they change their temperament and become so loyal? There was only one answer. This was a complete drama. The purpose was to make the small nobles who participated in the gathering believe in the good situation, and encourage them to become the vanguard of this undercurrent. The specific plan was probably started several months ago. By now, the 4 big families had probably already determined the division of benefits after the victory. Schilt opened his mouth, but he couldn't say what he thought. Miso Schilt was not the first son fill-in, so some dissuasion had no effect on him. Where are you going with this armor? The old sir asked after a moment of silence. To win honor and status. Miso put on the steel breastplate. Even if the Light of Dawn becomes the first knight of the western region, he will only be honored. But I will be honored for the whole family, father. When the dust settles, you will find that I am no worse than my brother. If Timothy can completely defeat Roland, you are right. But the new king's army is still far away in King's City, while His Highness Roland is close at hand. Have you forgotten how the Duke of Ryan was destroyed? Schilt said in a low voice. This time it's different. His Majesty the King has shipped a batch of snow powder weapons, the same as the ones used by Prince Roland before. I heard from Sir Med that there are more powerful ones to come. Without the advantage of weapons, can I still recapture Longsong's stronghold? Miso put the long sword on his waist and nodded to his father. The battle will begin soon. Please wait for my good news here. Looking at his second son's back, Schild threw his crutch to the ground. "Master, you don't want to stop him?" The butler came up to support the trembling old sir, and asked worriedly. "It is easy to stop him, but I am afraid that the family will be destroyed." He slowly shook his head. A noble who attended the rebellion meeting did not go to the attack site as agreed. What did this mean for the four families? Whether it was the crime of escaping or defecting, it could lead to the death of the Schild family. Think on the bright side. What if the four families win? The butler comforted him. After all, the months of demons will not end so soon. I am afraid it will be 2 or 3 months before the snow melts. By the time the fourth prince's army arrives, the king's army may have already surrounded the western region. If it was before, he might really think so. But since his trip to Border Town, Sir had a completely different view of His Highness Roland. Not to mention that his eldest son Philinshilt and his family's benefactor, Lady Agatha, both lived in Border Town. Chapter 446. However, before the butler left the territory of the Schild family, Roland had already received a letter from the Second Army of Stronghold by bird. An hour later, Perrault's letter for help also arrived at the town castle. Due to the limited information carried by the flying messenger, Roland connected the contents of the 2 notes and confirmed a surprising piece of news. The 4 noble families of the western region had rebelled. Who gave them the confidence to rebel right under their noses? Roland immediately summoned Carter and Ironax and slapped the note in front of them. "Your Highness, this is a message from Stronghold," Roland said angrily. Winter was coming to an end, and the new year would come in 3 days. There were many things to do in the construction of the city, and he also needed to guide the completion of the 3 supplies equipment in the town. These nobles really didn't know how to write the word death to make trouble for him at this time. According to the secret letter, the nobles in the city first led a group of squires to attack the city guards. By the time the patrolling guards on the city wall realized something was wrong, the lifting and lowering mechanism of the North City Gate suspension bridge had fallen into the nobles' control. They had to light the beacon and rely on the city wall to defend in place. The other members of the Second Army, who saw the beacon signal, divided the 10 groups of about 50 people in the camp into 2 teams according to the emergency response protocol. One team set out for the North City Gate, and the other rushed to the castle of Stronghold. Perrault's secret letter was sent by the second team after they exchanged fire with the enemy in the castle area. Only then did they realize that the enemy they encountered was the local nobles. Perrault Hull mentioned that the attackers who besieged the castle carried the flag of the 4 noble families. They must have planned this rebellion. Carter frowned after reading the note. And the nobles must have a new backbone to unite these scattered people. Indeed, the 4 noble families, or the 5 noble families under the Duke Ryan, were all great nobles on equal footing. The fact that they could put aside their prejudices and cooperate with each other meant that there was a bigger force involved in this muddy water. Otherwise, the earls would not be convinced of each other's strength, even if they fought for more than 10 years. At this time, there were only 1 or 2 possibilities left who had the leisure to intervene in the western region. "You mean Timothy of King's City?" Ironax looked at the chief knight. As a member of the Majin tribe, he was not as sensitive to the political situation in Grey Castle as Carter was. "I wouldn't be surprised if it's the church." Roland curled his lips. From what they did at Fallen Dragon Ridge, it's obvious that it's only a matter of time before they attack the western region. The problem is, the second letter mentioned that the enemy seemed to have firearms in their ranks. Carter frowned. Did they already know the gunpowder formula? Snow powder is no longer a secret to both the church and Timothy, but if they want to use it flexibly, they still have a long way to go. The prince gently knocked on the table. "I'm just curious. Even if they have the support of the forces behind them, distant water can't put out a nearby fire. Border Town is the closest place to Stronghold, so where did they get the confidence to fight against the soldiers of the First Army? It's probably because of the months of the demons." Ironax thought for a moment and replied. "Last time, although you used thunder to defeat the Duke's Knight Regiment, you didn't show outstanding siege ability. Now the roads are blocked by heavy snow, and the border is invaded by demonic beasts. For them, this is the best guarantee for a successful rebellion. You won't have the strength to attack Longsong's stronghold until at least 2 months later. Then they'll be blocked by the towering walls and mountains. Yes. Iron Axe couldn't help but grin. They also have the weapons you have, plus the unclimbable walls, and even the reinforcements from the forces behind them. It's not impossible to defeat you at the foot of the wall. I think they think so. But they know nothing about the power of Border Town. Roland stood up. Iron Axe. Please give the order, Your Highness. He immediately stood up. The first army is now ready to go. We'll set off tomorrow morning, the prince said loudly. 500 people with 6 field cannons. You'll arrange the specific troops. Yes. Iron Axe gave a standard military salute. Now the size of Border Town's first army was more than 4 times larger than the original 500 militia. The whole army had more than 2,200 people, and the wheels were basically in place. Their firepower output was not the same as before. And thanks to the improvement of the soldiers' cultural level, the First Army's efficiency in carrying out orders had also greatly improved. As long as the preparation order was issued, there would be special personnel in the army to allocate ammunition and rations according to the number of soldiers and the number of days. The logistics work of 500 people could be completed in almost 1 day, compared to the Knight and the Mercenary Corps, who needed half a month to prepare for the expedition. This could be called an incredible speed. And they would set off on the town's 11 paddle steamers, and directly arrive at Longsong's stronghold. After entering mass production, a ship with a reinforced concrete foundation would be launched every 5 days. This was under the condition that the construction speed was deliberately slowed down. The only thing limiting its number was the crew and the steam engine. Carter. At your command, Your Highness, the chief knight said with his head held high. You stay in Border Town. The knight's mouth instantly drooped. What? No, Your Highness. How can you leave me here again? It's the months of the demons now. The demonic beasts are a bigger threat than the nobles. Roland was unmoved. Guard my town well. After the two left, he sighed. This time, the witches also need to go with me. I'll follow you wherever you go, Nightingale said with a smile. Considering that the opponent might be the church, before all the members of the First Army were equipped with God's stones of retaliation, only witches could effectively deal with the pure witches' sneak attacks. Roland finally decided on the list of 6 witches: Vendi Lightning, Maggie, Sylvie, Nana, and Nightingale. If he added the 3 combat witches from Sleeping Island, it would be difficult for the pure witches to threaten him. Roland walked to the window and looked out at the snow-capped mountains and snow-covered fields. If the impassable mountain range was regarded as the walls of Longsong's stronghold, then the barbarian land to the north of the mountain range was equivalent to the territory of the 4 big families, which was also a place where his power could not reach. Elk, Wild Rose, Maple Leaf, Wolf. They had operated in their respective territories for hundreds of years, and formed their own laws and customs. Even the Ryan family, the overlord of the western region, rarely interfered. He had originally planned to slowly divide and absorb these nobles' territories after building the city, but this rebellion gave him an opportunity to annex the vast land and population in the suburbs of Longsong's stronghold. He did not intend to let this group of nobles go. To be continued. Chapter 447. At dawn, Kakuzim arrived at the dock. What was different from usual was that the dock was filled with silent people. They carried backpacks and long spears on their backs, like a dense forest in the wind and snow. Despite the large number of people, the scene was very orderly. The soldiers boarded the paddle steamer one by one. The scene alone made Kakuzim speechless. Kakuzim could not help but swallow his saliva. These were the soldiers of His Highness. It's incredible, the old man thought. When he was young, he had traveled more than half of Grey Castle, from Seawindshire to the port of Clearwater, and led a merchant fleet to the fjords. He had seen the mighty armored knight, and the fierce barbarians who could kill beasts with their bare hands. To him, those people were undoubtedly extremely powerful warriors. However, He did not expect to feel this power again in front of a group of ordinary people. And it was even stronger than before. Yes, these people are all ordinary people. Kakuzum had been in Border Town for almost 4 months, and had a deeper understanding of the town. He knew that the members of the First Army were mostly local natives. Most of them were already adults when they joined the army. They had a variety of occupations, such as miners, hunters, furnace workers, and masons, but none of them were soldiers. In other words, they had never received combat training since they were young. However, in just a few months, these people had already become as powerful as any knight regiment. What kind of magic did His Highness cast? You really want to go? Vader's deliberately lowered voice came from behind him. He could tell that he was also affected by the silent team. Otherwise, why would I apply for the position of captain? Kakuzum took a deep breath. But they're going to war. They're all serving His Highness, the old man said without turning his head. And so am I. The voice behind him was silent for a moment. Don't die out there. He did not answer and just waved his hand. Kakuzum boarded the number 6 paddle steamer in the snow. According to tradition, captains could name their ships. Although this strange ship belonged to His Highness, he was told that he had the right to do so. However, the old man was hesitant. This was the first time he had taken up the position of captain after more than 10 years of sailing. He hoped that he could come up with a memorable name. Boss, you're here. As he walked into the cabin at the bow of the ship, his assistant immediately came up to him. The boiler is now warming up. I guarantee it will be up soon. This young man was called Barracuda. He came from the Southern Territory and had several years of fishing experience. If he was on another fleet, he might not even be able to become a sailor, but here it was no different. Everyone was a newbie. Is the crew all here? We arrived a long time ago. You're the last one. The man winked. If you don't know how to respect a captain, I'll be happy to let you scrub the deck for the whole day. Yes, Captain, said the young man, standing erect. Of course I do. That's more like it, Kakuzum said, stroking his beard. Tell the boiler room to make the fire bigger, but don't close the damn steam valve. I don't want to hit the bottom of the ship in front again. Okay, I got it. Before he finished his sentence, Barracuda showed his true colors. He winked at the old man, and then flew out of the cockpit. This little rascal. Kakuzum shook his head with a smile. The solemn atmosphere of the First Army was greatly diluted. He felt as if he had returned to the days when he was sailing on the sea. Walking to the steering wheel, the old man gently stroked the wooden handle, and began to calm down to review the operation process of the paddle steamer. The stone boat invented by His Highness was completely different from sailboats. It had no masts or cabins under the deck. There were only 2 rooms in the bow and the middle of the hull. The one in front was called the steering room, where you could clearly see the route through 2 large windows. The one in the middle was the boiler room, where the boat was powered. The rear and rear of the cab were bare decks. During their training, they would often bring some miners along with them to the west along the Redwater River. They would go to the edge of the concealing forest and dig up some coal. This coal was more durable than firewood, and was also a relatively common source of heat in the Sewinshire region. Now the deck was covered with windproof cloth and a shed was set up overhead. Obviously, it was prepared for the soldiers. Even though Kakuzum had never touched this new thing before, he soon discovered that it was not difficult to make it move. In fact, it was much easier than a sailboat. Just the fact that there was no need to adjust the sails according to the direction and strength of the wind had saved a lot of manpower and time. Any villager could heat up the boiler, but it was impossible to master how to operate the sails without half a year of practice. As long as the chimney blew out white gas and closed the valve, the boat would leave. Just then, a dull whistle came from the front, breaking the tranquility of Border Town in the early morning. It was the signal to set off. Boss, the water in the boiler is boiling. Barracuda scurried back to the steering room. Ring the bell. Tell Bigfoot and Grizzly to close the valve. Speed, forward 1 step. Kakuzum ordered solemnly. Yes, forward 1 step. The Barracuda pulled up a thin iron wire on the wall, and along this wire, the corresponding bell in the boiler room would vibrate, conveying the captain's orders. The boat shook violently, and the wooden wheels on both sides slowly turned. Kakuzim held the steering wheel and looked straight ahead. When Vader asked that question, he did not say what he really wanted. Or rather, serving the Lord was only a small part of the answer. He simply liked the position of captain more than anything else. Whether it was a sailboat or a paddle steamer, Kakuzim felt sincerely happy when he held the steering wheel and broke the waves on the water. This was the life he wanted. Pull the sail. No, continue to add coal. The old man turned the steering wheel to the right and shouted, "Boys, hurry up, we're leaving." Asterisk, as long as you can take me to Border Town, the Schilt family will reward you handsomely. How about 5, no, 10 golden dragon? The butler asked the boatman, who was in a dilemma, as he blocked the door of a small wooden cabin by the river. His left foot was stuck in the crack of the door, so that the boatman would not close the old door and keep him out. Sir, it's not that I don't want to take you, but I really can't," the boatman stammered. You see, my boat has a bare bottom and doesn't even have a shed to keep out the snow. It's fine for crossing the river, but you said you want to go to Border Town, and that's going to take several days. Not to mention whether I can get there with a pole. It's a world of ice and snow at night. Where are we going to sleep? If you sleep on the boat, you'll be frozen into 2 popsicles all night. Are there any other boatmen around here who can go to Border Town? The butler asked, unwilling to give up. No. The other side repeatedly waved his hand. We only have a few small boats. Only in Stronghold can there be a large sailboat that can stay overnight. You should go there to find it. If I could enter Longsong Stronghold, why would I bother to come to the suburban pier to find these boatmen who fish and ferry for a living? The butler fiercely stepped on the snow on the ground. Since the 4 families began to attack Stronghold, all the gates had been closed. It took him half a day to bypass Stronghold and come here, but unfortunately, it was still in vain. It was getting dark. How could I complete the task my master had given me? The butler looked at the Redwater River with a bitter expression, but soon he was stunned. God, what is that? He rubbed his eyes to make sure that he was not mistaken. A very large fleet was sailing in his direction. The appearance of the ships was different from the sailboats he had seen before. In the sky full of flying snow, the fleet made a rumbling sound and moved quickly along the river. Except for the first oddly shaped sailboat, the other ships obviously didn't have sails, but they were moving against the wind. The bow of the ships cut the water into 2 sections, as if they were splitting the waves. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.